Many people like to.
Let's make a toast forever and ever. Let's make a toast forever and ever.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Up for Life podcast. I'm your host, B.Getz, and this is episode number 33. And we're coming at you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie Studios in Oakland, California. And it's been a few weeks, but I am so grateful for everybody tuning in.
Without love and the dreaming never come true. Yeah.
Episode 33 of the Up for Life podcast is brought to you by Help from My Friends, a benefit for Crew Nation. Due to the rapid onset of COVID-19, the live music industry has suffered mightily. All events, tours, festivals remain grounded to an indefinite halt. With it went the income streams of crew and staff of touring artists everywhere. Thus far, a large percentage have been marginalized or disqualified from stimulus funds. We all miss the magic of live shows, our favorite jams, and losing ourselves in the moment. But these fine folks, they're wondering how they're going to eat, pay bills, and take care of their families. So a group of big-hearted live music fanatics like myself have coalesced to help out our friends, and we need your help. Music fans like you. Make a difference in the lives of the people behind the scenes. You know, the crew. The ones who make the magic happen, building it from the ground up, city by city and night after night. By purchasing a limited edition poster from Help from My Friends, you're helping out these hardworking people whose lives and livelihoods are at a standstill. What poster, you say? This detailed original artwork was meticulously crafted by Mike Tallman of Ad Noise Studios. He's also a partner in Color Red Music. His poster conveys a deep gratitude for the fulfillment that live music provides to all of us. It's really a beautiful rendering. You can find it on adnoisestudios.com, upfullife.com, Live for Live Music. Now, 100% of net proceeds from this initiative will benefit Crew Nation, an org that commits to matching every dollar raised in this campaign and distributing it equitably. Please join us in lifting up and supporting the people in the music industry most affected by this unprecedented shutdown, the crew, and let them know a little help is on the way. Please check out Help from My Friends, a benefit for Crew Nation, adnoisestudios.com, upfullife.com. And we're back, episode 33 of the Upful Life podcast. And I want to say large up and a huge shout out to Adam Deitch, Bobby Deitch, Denise Deitch, and Ryan Zoidis for that big Lettuce and Bobby Deitch Band podcast, episode 32, the Adam Deitch Birthday Extravaganza. Just incredible feedback from that episode, and hope everyone enjoyed those thoughtful and enlightening conversations and has checked out Lettuce's brand new record, Resonate, which there's a feature article out on Live for Live Music that I put together on the day the album came out, and I've got something dropping for Bobby Deitch's brand new work with What You Got, which just dropped on Friday. So thanks to everybody who checked in the aftermath of that just very fulfilling experience, episode 32. And of course, we'll stay on the Lettuce beat as we move further down the road. But we're going to turn the page to episode 33, and that's a bit of a departure this time. We're going to take it in a different direction, and I trust that the listeners out there will come with me for a absolutely fascinating, frightening, heart-filling, inspiring ride. I wanted to start things off by stating that there's going to be some content discussed in this episode that is not just off the beaten path for the Up for Life podcast, but is a bit dark and somewhat graphic with regard to drug abuse, addiction, but also beautifully human stories of recovery, resilience, and rebirth. So it's no secret that for a very long time, and by that I mean over a dozen years, I struggled with a crippling addiction to pharmaceutical opiates. Fighting my way from the bottom of a pill bottle for over a decade, and it infected, invaded, and soiled nearly every aspect of my life for a very long time. And I am lucky to have lived through that nightmare and come out the other side, having lived to tell the tale. And I am committed to doing my part to help others find their way out of the darkness as well. And that's a big part of what this podcast is all about, specifically this episode. It's not like we haven't talked about addiction and recovery a couple of times before, most notably with the great Jeffrey Dupuy down there in New Orleans. But this is even going to take it 10 steps further. And I am looking to be a resource and of service to folks out there that are struggling with substance abuse, be it themselves, somebody they know and love. We do recover, and there are different ways to skin a cat and different pathways to liberation from the prison of addiction. And understanding the affliction is a huge part of that. And coming to terms with the disease itself and your own relationship to substances is something that is not easy to come by. So with that, I'll say that it's an honor and a privilege to welcome Dave from DOPEY Podcast to the Up for Life podcast. Now, DOPEY Podcast is a wildly popular around the world podcast about drugs, addiction, recovery, and dumb shit. And you're going to hear all about Dave, who started DOPEY with his dear friend Chris 4-ish years ago, and his journey through addiction into recovery, and his creating and maintaining and leading the Dopey Nation by way of the Dopey Podcast, which has been an invaluable resource to me as I seek to better understand my affliction, even if it is 4 years and 1 month in the rearview mirror. It is a one day at a time situation. That is not just a cliche, it is the real. So every day I'm diligently trying to better understand how I can increase this period of abstinence between me and that particular substance. And we're trying to save as many lives as we can, and I started with my own, and I'm here to help others. I don't have all the answers, and frankly, neither does Dave, but I've learned a great deal from his leadership, from his perspective, from his honesty and transparency, and his ability to create a community that thrives on the resilience of the human spirit and a burning desire to get better, whatever that means to them. So with that, we're going to let a little bit more of this Jane's Addiction ride out. Started you off with Slow Divers, and now we're into Then She Did. And we'll be back. I'm going to play a little bit of Dave's song, Good So Bad, and then we'll hear 100 Minutes with Dave from Dopey Podcast on the Upful Life Podcast. I'm your host, B.Getz.
I wanna take a walk around the world. I wonder would it do me any good? Until I get some money in my pocket, then I guess I'll just have to walk around my neighborhood. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had, and I wanna take a ride up in the sky. Watch this aeroplane just pass me by, and I wanna see a Lear jetliner take a dive, just to show all of these people what it means to be alive. But I wanna be good so bad. Wanna be so good, so bad, so bad. I wanna be good so bad. Bad desire's all I ever had.
Hey, Dave, it's B.Getz.
I know.
Well, welcome to the Upful Life Podcast, my friend.
I feel bad. I'm walking around suburbia in the nice, quiet thing, and then the fucking Long Island Railroad destroys my incredible ambiance. But it's an honor for me to be on the Upful Life Podcast with you, B. I am a big fan of yours, as whenever you call into Dopey and leave me stuff, it always makes me happy, and I love your contributions. So it's an honor for me to be a part of your podcast.
Wow, man, that's high praise, my friend, and I gotta say the feelings are mutual. It's an honor and a privilege to talk with you. I'm also a huge fan of yours, and I feel super connected to you. I actually had a really dopey style intro prepared, and the railroad threw me off.
I'm sorry.
I was gonna no.
Do it.
Okay. I want to say that this gentleman has become a force of nature in not just the recovery community, but podcast listeners around the world. He's somebody that I've paid attention to for about 18 months now. I found my way to the Dopey Podcast. We'll get to that later. And in that time, Dave has become just like a voice of reason, a voice of positivity, somebody who, like I said, I feel uniquely connected to for a number of symbiotic ways. And I'm not alone. There are hundreds and even thousands of us who tune in to do the Dopey Podcast every week for a dose of Dave and whatever he has planned. So I've been hoping and angling to have Dave on my show for a long time, but he's a busy guy. He puts out a podcast every week. He's got a full-time job. He's a father to two lovely little girls, and has a lovely partner named Linda, who we'll also talk about a little bit. So all that to say, it is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome Dave from Dopey Podcast to the Upful Life Podcast.
Man, that was probably the best introduction I've ever had. So thank you. It's awesome.
I meant every word of it, my friend. And I think like the listeners to this, I obviously don't have anything near the scope or reach of you, but I think it's going to be like a 50-50 where hopefully a bunch of the Dopey Nation will find their way to this show. And I know that, our affliction and drug use and recovery is a constant topic on this podcast because we talk about music and musicians and music culture. And with that, sex, drugs, rock and roll, you know the drill. So we've had quite a bit of recovery talk and quite a bit of, not quite dopey stories, but, some funny tales. So I do think that our conversation is going to really be of note and of interest to both of our respective listenerships. But you've been really an example of what's possible in this medium, and the fact that it happened so organically and by accident and lightning in a bottle, and of course peaks and some really deep valleys along the way. We're going to get to all that. I just want, and I'm sure you've done this a number of times on all the podcasts, give us the dopey cliff notes for people who are like, what the hell is a dopey podcast? We'll tell them it's about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. When you're trying to break it down for the layman, as they say, how do you explain what your show is?
Well, I mean, I think the first thing I say is it's about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. But and then the next thing I say is basically it was a podcast designed to be all the stupidest, worst things that I had ever done in terms of drugs, and that my friend Chris had ever done in terms of drugs. And I started it with my friend Chris, who I had met in rehab in Connecticut many years ago, and he was 2 years into recovery when we started, and I was 4 months. And he had the best drug stories that I had heard, and I just thought it would be entertaining to do that. So Dopey was just about like the dumbest, worst drug stories we had. And it kind of became a show about recovery, because as soon as we started to tell the dumbest drug stories we had ever experienced, I was like, it sounds like we're glorifying drugs. So we should really like make it clear that we're in recovery. And then I always wanted it to be like the Howard Stern show. So it kind of just evolved into this conversational thing, echoing back and forth between drugs, addiction, recovery, and dumb shit. And that's basically Dopey, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's a pretty, succinct and direct, kind of encapsulation of what it is. Now, it was very humble beginnings with you and Chris. As you said, you were 4 months, he was 2 years. So take us basically just through the nascent days of Dopey, how you guys did it. And when did you realize that, you were onto something and people were really paying attention and cared?
I think it took a long time to realize that anybody was onto it. But I mean, in the first place, I was making this web series, like this dumb web series about waiting tables at Katz's Deli, and it got some attention, and Chris was like, wow, you're getting a lot of attention. I'd like to get attention. Can I do something with you? And I was like, yeah, I was like, sure, I'll do something. Because Chris was really like, he was somebody I turned to because I had just gotten clean again. And if Chris could get clean time, I was like, this dude could really be of use to me. And he just had a lot of good recovery stuff. So I figured if I came up with something for him to do, we would be bound by it. And I remembered I had this friend in California who had always wanted to do a podcast about drugs and drug stories, only he wasn't a drug addict, my friend. And I was like, Chris, why don't we do a podcast together? And he was like, what's a podcast? And I was like, I'm not sure. I think it's like a radio show. I think we just talk and people listen to it. So he came to my apartment in Manhattan, and I was like, just think of a couple drug stories, and I'll think of a couple drug stories, and we'll take turns. And the first one starts, and he thought it was just going to be him telling the story. But I knew there had to be like a lead up, like where you get a vibe, or else it would have been really like cold, I thought. So I just started making fun of Chris. And Chris is one of these people that actually, he's one of the few people that I've ever known who loves to be made fun of. And he took it in really like just amazingly good humor, and it kind of just became this shtick we did. And then he told his story, and I interrupted him like 50 billion times. But it was really like interrupting him was like getting the chemistry of our thing going. And then we just started doing it, and we did it for, I want to say we did it for a year and a half, and we had a very small audience, but the audience was pretty vocal. And as soon as we heard from one person, we were like, holy shit, you know, people are listening. And we'd hear from people in Australia. And the point of the show was to like have fun in recovery and other kind of like recovery podcasts. I just always assumed they were very preachy and proselytizing. So at the end of one episode of Dopey, I was like making a joke, and I was like, so stay strong, Dopey Nation, like a joke. And all of a sudden it meant there was a Dopey Nation. And we started hearing from people and getting people to send in stories from all over the world. And it sort of just grew. And, you know, at this point, it's the biggest it's ever been, but it's still tiny is the thing. Like advertisers don't really want to have anything to do with us. We just have a very, very, very vocal, loving audience. If that's kind of the beginning. You know, the beginning was just us, like, and just like kind of testing the limits of our chemistry. And, you know, like, it was really the most beautiful thing about Dopey was that I barely knew Chris when we started. And basically over the next 3 years, the podcast documented our friendship. And as soon as we started Dopey, we literally talked every day. So, I mean, that's the most magical and beautiful thing about the show.
There's a lot of magical, beautiful things, but that's certainly the embryonic sort of how it began, and I think that was really well articulated. I know much of what we're going to talk about, even though you've talked about it a lot, isn't exactly easy footing. So I'll just go ahead and get away with it and say I really appreciate you being willing to revisit, you know, your friendship and what you built with Chris. And I want to talk about who Chris was and how the yin and yang thing with you and him, which I got to say, I knew it was shtick, but in the early days, it got on my nerves a little bit, almost just like this sort of dynamic between you two. But in the end, it was like something I really grew to appreciate between the two of you, and it was a beautiful dynamic. But I think it's important for people to understanding how you even got to that point. I want to maybe talk about, you know, your time in addiction, because like I said, and I want to take it further back because I grew up in you know, a middle-class Jewish family in a metropolitan area just outside of Philly and Cherry Hill, and I never wanted for anything and was always afforded these amazing opportunities in life, in sports and music and education. Yet I found my way to drugs, and I lost a long time, you know, a dozen plus years, you know, at the bottom of a pill bottle, you know. And it's what drew me to even find Dopey, which happened by accident. And it's also what keeps me tuning in every week and has connected me to so many people in the community, is the fact that I have struggled with addiction. And I guess I'll always have to identify as an addict. I'm not in recovery or totally sober, but I just, you know, reached 4 years of abstinence from opiates. And I think that a big part of that is my connection to the show and the community, and really to you, man. So talk us a little bit about your upbringing, where you came up, what you were into, and how did you, you know, end up, you know, on heroin for so long?
Well, first of all, that means a lot to me. You know, like, you know, I think it's easy to take for granted the idea of, you know, Dopey to a Dopey listener is huge. Dopey to a non-Dopey listener is like, what the fuck is that? So for you to say that to me, it means It means a lot to me because I often just go through life like without it affecting me, you know? So I appreciate that. I grew up in Manhattan. I grew up in Chelsea. My parents were both public school teachers, and I had a similar sort of upbringing that you did, where it was upper middle class splendor. We lived in shitty public housing, but it afforded us basically whatever we wanted. And I got into a school, like a very, very, very special public school. I got in when I was 4, and I graduated when I was 17. And the school produced a lot of like geniuses, doctors, and educators, and like some famous sportscasters and weird musical theater writers. And it was a very, very special place. And I was totally mediocre or below mediocre. And I had this group of friends who made me feel safe. And whatever sort of alcoholic addict qualities I had, I was protected from those qualities by my little group of friends. So like my drug addict didn't emerge until after I left high school. And I went to college. I went to Ithaca, and I was very lonely. And I had started to smoke weed, and I had started to the first time I drank to blackout, you know. I was a waiter at a summer camp, and I just drank vodka until I blacked out. And it was all about my loneliness and my disconnection from myself and feeling like out of my skin, like not comfortable. So when I got to Ithaca College, I felt those things too, only I was a musician and I was in a band and I enjoyed bud. And I remember I had a very close friend who was a jazz studies major, and I had met him in cultural anthropology. And I had decided we needed to become stoners because, like, why wouldn't we become stoners if he's a fucking jazz guitar major and studying cultural anthropology? So we started smoking pot one night, and I didn't stop for, 22 years every day. And as soon as the ball got rolling, it kind of just inspired me to think of myself the way I thought of my heroes, like John Lennon and different heroes sort of rolled in and out, or, Bob Marley. I was like, this is what they did, or Jack Kerouac or whatever. I was like, this is what they did. And as I did more drugs, as I did more pot, as I ate mushrooms or acid or pills or tried coke, it was like, this is what they did, and this is what was necessary for me to become who I wanted to be. Plus, it had the great benefit of letting me not be neurotic and worrying about everything and hiding, behind getting high. Like, I needed to stay high. It medicated my neuroses. It medicated my, overactive imagination, my overactive paranoia, my self-hatred. It just medicated all that shit. And I wound up in at SUNY Purchase because I had basically gotten busted at Ithaca. And SUNY Purchase was like this art school. And I was living with that same jazz guitar major who he got kicked out with me. And his friend was in this big indie rock band. And he came up from Manhattan and he had some heroin on him. And I was like, sure, I'll try that. And it didn't suit me the first night. I wound up throwing up the whole night. But a few years later, I tried it again. And it totally did for me what I couldn't do for myself. It just made me feel like perfect. And I knew that I couldn't afford to be an addict. But over the next few years, my career kicked in. And I decided I could. And that's basically how I lost a dozen years also. I lost... I was probably 23 when I got really into heroin, and I didn't stop taking it until I was 35, and I still stayed on drugs another 6 years. So we're talking about 18 years of, total annihilation, drug addiction. It's a miracle that I have the life I have, basically.
It certainly is, man. And a lot of what you touch on, it's funny because, all these, how many weeks we're at with Dopey now, and you're talking about your life, and your family, but especially the old school sort of you're coming up. I mean, I'm from the sort of same roots, like you said, and there's just so many similarities to our path that I feel just like you really are emblematic in a lot of ways, you know, of how I came up and also how I lost my way. I also suffer from intense neuroses and for a while when I was younger, struggled, you know, with my sense of self in social situations. So I think that's pretty commonplace. But what isn't commonplace is somebody's career taking off just while their appetite for heroin engages. I know a little bit about your career, but most of my listeners probably don't. I know that I just listened to an amazing clip of you on the Howard Stern show, presenting him with a fake award that it was the ultimate Stern joke on Stern.
Yeah.
My man J.A. that I grew up with, one of my best friends, he comes on the pod all the time. He's about Stern like you're about Stern. And so I understand that the gravity of what that was like for you. But instead of just like that particular incident, what was your career like? I know you moved to LA, you were in the TV business, and then like when did it fall apart?
Well, it's interesting. What happened was really I was getting just any kind of weird job I could get. Like my parents had put me on a list to get a cheap apartment in the public houses where I grew up when I was 11. So when I was 21 or 22, I got a studio apartment on 24th Street. It was $300 a month, and it was big, and it was awesome. And it was like the apartment of my dreams. And I moved in there, and I just like started taking weird jobs. And a buddy of mine was a PA for MTV Unplugged, I think, and he like tripped and he sprained his ankle or something. And he had a job at this place called Burly Bear, and he asked me if I wanted to do it. Now, there's a piece of the story that's like critical just to my own like sort of my own like thinking of destiny, which was when I was in high school. Like in my high school, in that special high school, you don't graduate. You kind of graduate when you're in 11th grade. So your senior year, you do an internship. And I had gotten an internship with one of my best friends at MTV. And we spent the year like just trying to get on MTV. And we got on MTV. And we did a couple of on-air things for them. And it was like this very exciting thing. And you know, people recognized me, and it was like nothing, but it was very big to me, and it made me think that I could do anything, really, that I could be. I also had always wanted to be a talk show host. It was like a weird thing. Like, since I was a little kid, like, I would go into the kitchen, and my mom would be listening to AM radio, and she would listen to a show called Rambling with Gambling. This is like this talk show host called John Gambling. And it was very, like, middle-of-the-road stuff, but it was so relaxing to listen to. And I was like, wow, I love what he does. And then I kind of got interested in what Regis Philbin did, and I was like, this dude just knows how to talk to people, and he relaxes people. And then I discovered Howard Stern, and I was like, holy shit. Because Howard Stern, like, grossed me out. Like, I didn't know anything about him, and his style grossed me out. But then when I actually listened to him, I was like, I just couldn't believe how warm he was and inviting. And I was like, I want to do something like that. So my friend sprained his ankle, and he got a job at this company called Burly Bear. And Burly Bear was owned by Lorne Michaels, who owned Saturday Night Live and Broadway Video. And it was a college cable network. It was tiny, but I was 22 or 23. So it was perfect. And I walked in, and the owner of the place, I don't know. And I didn't look like a drug addict or anything, and I was barely using. I was just a stoner, and I kind of just looked like middle-class Jewish college kid that I was. But he sits me down, and he says, I know you think you've done a lot of drugs, but trust me, I've done more. And I was like, okay. And his big show, it was before the Dave Chappelle movie Half Baked had come out, and he had come out with the show called Half Baked, which was about his friend who was a stoner, and he would cook food and get stoned while he would cook. And they hired me to be the PA, the production assistant. And then they kind of figured out that I was this stoner. So they basically made me in charge of getting them weed and keeping the host high and kind of like figuring out how high he should be. And I would come out with crazy bud, and they would shoot in Westchester, like near where I went to school. So I had tons of different bud sources, and I would bring tons of bud. And if he got too high, I'd like buy him a sandwich or whatever. And I kind of just got in with them. And then they just started putting me on different shows, like on the Half Baked show or on like between shows. And then they let me produce, like assistant produce a couple things. And then I was just like, let me produce something. And they had a music video show. And they were like, well, you could produce the music video show and you can host it, is what they said. And I was like, great. And like, I think 2 million people watched it, but like, it was all distributed through VHS tapes to college campuses around the country. And the first show I was doing, it was like the first video they wanted me to play was a video from KRS-One, you know, the MC from Boogie Down Productions. And I was a huge KRS-One fan. And I was like, holy shit, it's going to be, you know, or the first video we're going to play is KRS-One. And I looked in the Village Voice, and that week, KRS-One was playing at Tramps. And I was like, well, what if we interviewed him and shot a performance of his? And they were like, yeah, do what you want. So I hired a friend of mine, and we went down to Tramps, and we shot KRS-One, and I interviewed him, and it was like, he was really cool. He's an amazing person to interview because he's warm and well-spoken, and he like treated me like I was important, and it made me seem like I was a good interviewer. And they were like, this is pretty cool, Dave. What would you want to do if you could just do whatever? And I was like, well, I'd want to do like a music magazine show. And they let me do it, and it turned from a video, like a music video show, to a sort of music magazine show. And whoever was coming to New York, like back then there were a lot of clubs, and kind of big people would play little clubs. And the fact that Lorne Michaels owned our company made it fairly easy to get people. And I managed to interview like a bunch of people that I loved. And as soon as I got the show, maybe 6 months into it, they were like, we think you're doing amazing stuff. We want to give you a contract. So they gave me a pretty decent contract. And as soon as they gave me the contract, I was like, I can afford to do heroin every day. But like the acts I got to interview like EPMD. I interviewed Beanie Man. I interviewed Bob Weir. I interviewed fucking Flaming Lips, Pavement, like John Paul Jones, fucking Maceo Parker, Bernie Worrell. Like it was just like crazy, you know. It was, and it's also like anything I wanted to do, we did. Like we would go to the South by Southwest, or we would, I had to travel with Marcy's Playground. It was just like, and the show was total scrubby. Like it was me and my friends from school shot everything, and it looked like somewhere between an art film and like public access. But it was fun. And I did the Howard Stern thing.
That's an absolute dream gig, man. I mean, when I think about that, first, just a little detour. KRS-One, the teacher, I mean, what a way to start. And I gotta say, all this time I've been listening to you on your show, the connections through music that we both love and kind of defined us from all the folks you just reeled off that you know is all in my wheelhouse.
I know, I want to impress you.
Well, dude, not necessary. I'm thoroughly impressed. I was actually nervous for this interview. I had to go for a little stroll ahead of time to kind of get my breathing down. So I'm trying to impress you, my friend.
No, don't worry. I'm easily impressed.
Right on. Likewise. But, you know, I just wanted to ask about just a quick detour. Like, What instruments did you play as a kid, and what was maybe some of your favorite shit? And I know you love the Dead, and I know you were into, like, downtown New York jam bands around the millennium. Just give us a quick detour on, like, your music journey.
I never could play. I mean, it's funny because, like, when I was 16, I couldn't play anything, and you kind of think you're never going to be able to play anything. And I went with my dad, and he grew up with this congressman from Queens, and he took us to a Met game. And we were going home from the Met game, and Love Me Do from the Beatles came on, and John Lennon played the harmonica, and I was like, I bet I could play the harmonica if I really tried. So I bought a harmonica and I bought a book, and I just started practicing playing harmonica. And my parents got me a class at the New School in Manhattan with all these like 40-year-old Jewish guys, and I learned how to play harmonica at it, and I got good at it. And then in my high school there was a ska band, a reggae ska band called the Percolators, and they're pretty good. And I joined that band, and like my whole life changed. You know, like we rented a studio on we had a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week studio on 14th Street, and it was like just the best time ever. Like we opened for the Wailers, we opened for all of the ska bands in New York, Mephistopheles, the Scofflaws, all the northeast big bands and stuff. And it was just before ska like blew up, and New York City ska in like the early 90s, 91, 90. It was just like a crazy time, like with skinheads, slam dancing, and the meatpacking district was actually packing meat. And if you went to a club down there, it was like fucking shitty, and it was just warehouses, but it was like old New York. And that's basically where I learned to play music. And I learned how to play guitar in college and a little bit of piano in college. And then I played in a soul band in college. I played in a 14-piece soul band, and I played harmonica and I sang in that band. And we would know like 50 songs, and we would sell out clubs in Ithaca, and it was fun. And then after that, all of my music was like not really professional. It was just fun. I played in a hip hop band in Ithaca. I was a rapper in this fucking hip hop band with 2 drummers, a bass player, and a blind piano player, and it was good. We were good. But last night I watched the Beastie Boys documentary, and like if I had confidence, I think we could have done something, but I didn't have confidence, so it didn't happen.
Yeah, I'm dying to see that. I saw them when they did the play version of the book, and of course have the book. And I just want to say, but you're such a quintessential New Yorker. Like you talk about people like Michael Imperioli, who you've had on the show, or John Joseph, and I think you're in that fine tradition of just a quintessential New Yorker. So when you talk about whether it's the Beastie Boys or the Meatpacking District or the ska scene, you're just like it's like a historical reference and sort of lets us know there's so much depth in those references is basically what I'm saying. So it helps me and hopefully some listeners kind of understand your path and a lot of what you talked about with music on the show and just like your relationship to it and the type of stuff that you were exposed to. I mean, Ithaca has such an amazing reggae scene back then with like John Brown's Body, old school, so I feel you, man. While we're on the topic of music, and not to get super serious, but you had to realize it was coming. It was recently your dear friend's Todd's birthday, who passed away not that long ago, a year and a half or so. And the reason I bring up Todd, first and foremost, is I'd been around him a few times, only realized that from the photographs on Dopey,
Right.
and some mutual friends. I never knew him or anything, but I knew who he was. And also it's just like the other day I was thinking about it because you mentioned it was his birthday and you were going to do the Todd Shot Part 2 episode.
Yeah.
And I knew him or knew of him because of Fish. So Fish a long time ago wrote a song called Dirt. Trey and Tom Marshall did, and it's really about just saying goodbye to somebody deceased. And I put it on for no reason. I can't remember the last time I just voluntarily put on a Fish studio cut out of nowhere, but I did for Todd, and I had a really good cry. And that should be a testament to how you've memorialized him, how you've used him as a cautionary tale, an example of the inherent good in people even when they're struggling with addiction. And there's such amazing lessons and like humanity and understanding of not just affliction, but just like relationships and friendship in you and Todd. So I want to just honor him for a second there. And I know he's so crucial to your journey with drugs. So before we get into your relationship with your co-host, Chris, who was Todd to you and And just maybe a couple reflections, whether you've said them on the show or not, for the folks at home. Because I bet a handful of folks that listen to this that I know from the fish community probably knew him too.
Todd was one of my favorite people I ever met. He was like a classic sort of like new school hippie stoner. I met him in 92, and it was like probably before he became a new school hippie stoner. He was just some suburban kid from Clifton Park. And he loved our soul band. You know, we had this soul band. It was like the Blues Brothers kind of thing. You know, in retrospect, it was probably very corny, but it was a lot of fun. And he loved our band, you know, and our band had like backup singers in it that were kind of hot, and he loved these girls. So he would go to every show, and he was a stoner, and I had just started smoking a bunch of weed, and he was like quintessential hippie suburban kid who said things like, me being from New York, like from Manhattan, I was too cool for school with Todd's shit. But at the same time, I loved it, and I was super jealous of the way he spoke and the dumb shit he would say, and I was just like totally fell in love with it. And we started just by selling weed together, and it turned into like we would trip all the time together, and we would listen to music, and I would make fun of him, and he, you know, and I was a big nerd, so I was like, he was way cooler than me, but I acted like I was way cooler than him. And we just had this amazing friendship, and that was the beautiful part. And then the underside of it was we were both addicts, you know, like hardcore drug addicts. And even though we didn't know it at the time, you know, we wouldn't know it for years and years and years. But basically, we just went down this path, and it started in Ithaca. And we stayed in touch, and we probably stayed in touch because we were both so committed to being fucked up. Like, we lived for oblivion. Like, we would talk about, like, late night, because whatever we did that night, at late night, we would smoke everything we have and take everything we had. And we wound up, like, going in on a bunch of sheets of acid, and he wound up getting arrested in Ithaca and getting kicked out after I got kicked out. And then, like, we went to Amsterdam together, and then I had this girlfriend who cheated on me, and I was living at that apartment in Manhattan, and me and Todd were talking all the time, and he always wanted to come down, and I was like, why don't you just move in with me, and as long as you buy the drugs, I'll pay for rent. So that was our arrangement. And he moved into my apartment on 24th Street, and he started delivering weed for one of these weed delivery services, and I started delivering weed for one of these weed delivery services, and we would pinch all the boxes of weed, and, you know, and then he started to get really into coke, which I was never that into, and we found a delivery service that delivered coke, and it turned out they delivered everything. They delivered ecstasy, coke, heroin, GHB, they delivered everything. And I was working for that video company, and I went away to shoot a talk show in Michigan, and when I came home, Todd was there, and a bunch of kids from Purchase were there, and they all wanted to connect with the coke guy. And I come in, and there's like 10 people there buying coke from this 17-year-old kid, and I was like, dude, what are you going to give us for getting all these guys high? And he threw down 2 free bags of heroin. And me and Todd did the bags of dope, and I think it was a Sunday night, and we watched The Simpsons, and we got so high, like we fell out, and in the morning, we were still high. And I remember the joke was in the morning, it was like, like it was just like total serenity. And that was when I caught that first feeling of this is how I want to feel. And Todd did too. And from there, it was just like we were like racehorses, kind of like just doing drugs. And Todd saw how far I was willing to go, and I was making more money than him, and I had more of a career than him. So he bailed early. And then from there, it was just the two of us just like basically failing, like who could fail worse, basically, until, also Todd introduced me to my partner. You know, he went to college with basically my quote-unquote wife, who I have 2 kids with, and he introduced me to her. And we all did drugs together the first night we met, and then we all did drugs together the next night we met, which was 13 years later. And I got clean. And Todd, I used needles, and Todd didn't. So Todd would always kind of just talk about me as like this worst version of him. And when I finally got clean in the end, like he couldn't believe that I was doing it. But also like it was the first time in all the time I had done drugs or tried to get clean that I actually had found some sort of peace of mind, which he never got to find. And he wound up dying, like you said, 2 Junes ago or Mays ago, somewhere in late May or early June. And, it's crazy. And now I get to celebrate him on Dopey, and it's kind of sobered me up a lot more. Like I think Dopey was a lot looser before Todd died, but, it sucks.
Yeah, man, absolutely brutal. I'm really grateful that you were willing to go there. I know it's not easy, and you really do his memory justice. And I think it's important, that people hear the story because, as I said, there's a lot of lessons there. Now, I guess at this point in the journey, it's like, all right, before you did Dopey, you got clean, and you just referenced your lovely partner, who you've had on the show a number of times, and you guys have been really honest about, what happened, and then how you got here. It's such a crucial, because a lot of people might be listening, and this isn't Dopey, so there's been a lot of like, this is how we got high and when, but that's just the preamble, because the revolution that your life experienced with your partner and as your 2 daughters you mentioned is really where the story takes a turn to, from nightmare to fairy tales.
Yeah, I mean, well, the weirdest part was like, I was on methadone for years and years. I was on methadone for, I want to say 6 years or between 5 and 7 years. It was very foggy, and I was on a ton of benzos, on Klonopin and Xanax, and I was living in Los Angeles. And I got a phone call from my mom, and she said that she had leukemia, and she didn't think she was doing well. And I had kind of been in denial about, my life and my life in relation to my family. And my mother was pretty straight shooter type. Like, she didn't fuck around. If she said something, chances are that was how it was. And she told it to me in this way that I just had this moment that I knew she was going to die. And I was just like living with a girlfriend in Los Angeles on 150 milligrams of methadone every day, and shooting dope, and taking, between 10 and 20 milligrams of Xanax or Klonopin a day, and, smoking weed all day and not working, and just like a mess. And I was like, I can't do this. She can't die while I'm out here like this. So I decided I was going to get off methadone. And it took me like 6 months, 8 months or something. And I moved back home, and I stopped taking heroin, and I stopped taking pills, and I stopped taking methadone, obviously, and I just kept smoking weed. And then my mom died, and Todd was still hanging out with that woman, and she was like literally the most beautiful woman I had ever met. And I was like, I was in shock because my mother had died. I was just totally leveled, and I was like, why don't you let me go out with you guys one night? And I think he was showing me pity when he finally let me go out with them, and it was him and Linda and some other people. And as soon as I saw Linda, I was like, let's do this kind of thing. Just immediately. I was just so attracted to her and drawn to her. And somehow, like, it worked out. And like, within, I don't know, like 3 months or 4 months, she was pregnant. And I was not in recovery. I was still smoking weed. And I'd even done dope a few times with Todd. And after she got pregnant, I don't know why, but Todd started coming around to our apartment in Astoria with dope. And I hadn't picked up full on habit, but it was, it was getting to a bad place. And then we had the baby, and the addiction got much worse. And she caught me. She didn't know. She didn't know that I was using. She didn't know what was happening. We had a tiny baby, a 3-month-old baby, and I was still shooting dope. And she caught me one night, and she left, and I was fucked up, I was fucked up on the drugs, and I couldn't believe I had fucked up my life to that degree. And that was in 2010, right? And I spent the year, I was working at Katz's. I was actually a manager at Katz's Deli, and my drug use spiraled out of control. I was doing like $300 in heroin every day. I was passing out while I was working. I was coughing while I was working. I would go home and shoot dope immediately. I would pay dealers just to come to my house with dope. It was just it was bad, and it got really, 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 really bad. And I had lost custody. And obviously, I was only seeing my kid with my dad, and we would come out to Long Island, and I would nod out while I was playing with my baby. And then one day, I think I went out, I was bored in Manhattan, and I was living on the Lower East Side, and I went to some bar. I had done a ton of dope, and I went to some bar, and I was walking home, and I walked into a wall, and I broke my nose, and I got a black eye. And then I nodded out at work, and I got fired. And I couldn't handle losing that job. So I told Linda what had happened, and she's like, you got to get treatment. And my cousin owned Katz's Deli, and he was like, listen, go to treatment, but you're not going to manage this place again. You can come back and you can be a waiter. And I was like, okay. And I went to treatment, and that was when I met Chris. And I went to this treatment center in Connecticut called Mountainside, and that's when I met Chris. And that was the beginning of my path back. But that was I had a million bottoms, but that last run at Katz's when Nora was a baby was definitely the worst run I ever had.
Yeah, man. I mean, so heavy. And again, thanks for going there, man. You've been so open, not just now, but obviously on your show. A big part of the beauty, especially of current day Dopey, is how open the family's been. I mean, we've heard the version of that story from you, and we've heard it from Linda, and we've heard it from her mother, which I got to say was one of the most gripping episodes in a long time, was you and her tiptoeing through that time in your life and coming out the other side. And I got to say it was just transcends even Dopey. It was just such an amazing human story. So, I appreciate that you take it there on the show. And obviously, you didn't get here overnight, and your partner, she wasn't a fan of the show in the beginning. So just to bring it up to speed, you're 4 months sober. You and Chris come together. He's got 2 years. As you talked about earlier, you did, a number of episodes, built up a small but vocal global following.
Yeah.
Now, people who are listening who want to know actually maybe the Cliff's Notes to the whole story, the Dopey for Dummies, there's an episode of This American Life. So at what point, I guess, does your partner realize that Dopey is actually helping people and kind of, instead of not supporting it, she becomes an integral part of it? And then, of course, Chris's relapse and passing.
Basically, Linda found out about Dopey right when we had started. Maybe I want to say episode 12. I hadn't told her about Dopey because I just didn't want to. And I felt very free on Dopey, and I didn't think anybody would listen to it, and it was anonymous. And I remember I was sitting in a diner with her, and I was like, I'm doing this podcast with my friend. It's called Dopey. And she was like, well, let me listen to it. And she listened to like one of the episodes now that's gone. And it was like the first thing I started talking about was like her dad and our daughter and like watching movies with them. And she's like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? She like lost it. And she was like, you got to take these down. So like I told Chris to take down the whole show. And he did. He took the whole show down. And then like Linda started like researching Dopey, and she saw that people thought it helped them, which was something that I never thought. Like even when Linda was convinced that it was helping people, I just let her think that because I wanted to do it. But in my opinion, like it was never about that. Dopey was about me and Chris having fun. And then she agreed to let us put it back on as long as I didn't tell any fucked up stories. So for the first like 23 episodes, I don't tell any fucked up stories. Like the first 12 episodes, we took out all of my stories. And then the next 11 episodes, I only told stories that weren't like drug stories. Like I would tell the story like when we snuck into the Knick game, or just stories about like dumb shit and not about the worst stuff I had ever done, until I kind of realized that she had stopped listening. And I was like, fuck it. Like, what are we going to do? You know, so we just started going for it. And Linda's a social worker, so she saw a lot of potential in us helping people.
To the casual listener, and I know this has been a lot of the blowback you've gotten from the quote recovery community, is that it's a bit juvenile, or it celebrates, getting fucked up, and it lacks responsibility or awareness or sensitivity. And I guess it was all those things in the beginning. And that's part of the charm is like, I would never be frankly interested in listening to your traditional, like sober dogma, recovery podcast, at least not regularly. But I was in search of some information about kratom a year, like 2.5 years ago. And I looked for a podcast, and you must have mentioned it or put it in the show notes, but it was a very innocuous part of one episode. But at the time I was working on the ganja farms, and I would need to like download a bunch of stuff to listen to because we wouldn't get a great signal. Same reason why I had to come down the hill to call you today to get a good signal. So right. The first time I heard Dopey, it was like 4 episodes. And one of them was actually you getting kicked out of a weed farm, which was like, holy shit. It's like, I know this guy, right? Just really one of the first of many synchronicities. And I grew to appreciate the candor and just the frankness and the realness. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, the chemistry between you and Chris. And up until his death and obviously afterwards, Chris is such a important, essential part to the Dopey story. In life, he was like a yang to your yin. So I would love if you just explore who he was a little bit, and then like, how he went from somebody who you looked up to in their recovery to someone who went back out and sadly died.
Well, I mean, first of all, like Dopey is Chris's show. It's like, it was our show, and there'll never be an episode of Dopey where I don't at least mention him. And I still look up to him, even though he fucked up and died. He's very, very bright guy. He's just like, he knew his shit, and he was very special. I'll tell you this, I still get messages on Instagram from random people all the time. And I want to say that like every few months I get a message from a woman in her early 20s who writes me, I know Chris would have been my soulmate had we met. And that's basically who he was. He was just like infinite magnetism. You listened to him and you liked him. He could go toe to toe with anybody intellectually. Obviously his stories were off the hook in terms of like graphicness and his ability to tell them. He was like a wonderful storyteller. He, and I mean, that's what we had in common more than anything, was our love of the minutia. Like we were both Seinfeld people who could get off on talking about nothing. And like, if you have a story where you wind up like roughing up the nurse at a veterinarian clinic to steal feline Xanax, which they don't have, and you wind up stealing phenobarbital, but but the details make the story come alive. That's what Chris was. Like, he'd have the most debauched story, but then there would be one detail, like the cereal he was eating or something stupid. And then on the other side, he knew everything inside and out about recovery. He knew everything inside and out about drugs. He had been to like 15 treatment centers. He had spent 2 years in jail. He was, came from money, but he was the real thing. He just knew everything about this. And there couldn't have been a better person to do it with. Not to mention, he was such a fucking slacker and such a dodo, but at the same time, he was obsessed with the show, just like I was. I mean, he would drive to New York to do the show from Massachusetts. We wouldn't have done the show had he not been so fucking invested, It never would have happened. I never went to Massachusetts once to do the show. In the end, we would meet in the Hamptons to do it at his parents' house, but, I mean, he was the show.
Wow, man, that's profound and deep and heartfelt. And yeah, it was always funny because Chris was really, he was comically unawares of like the zeitgeist, songs, films, things that everyone knows about. He was rather clueless about, but he could quote these multisyllabic medical definitions in terms like right off the dome. And of course, yes, his stories, his brazen behavior, he really just lacked judgment. And those episodes with him, all of them, right up till the bitter end, is such a beautiful snapshot of a human, somebody who continues to be both a cautionary tale and a beacon of light. And like Todd, you memorialize and serve Chris's legacy admirably, respectfully, responsibly, but still in line with his ridiculous sense of humor and absurdist nature. I got to tell you, I've gone back and listened to his last 3 appearances, the last 3 episodes he was on, after the Artie Lang. I don't want to get to maybe Artie if we have time, but just because I felt like I know you guys, I listened to so many of them, one after the other, while I'm fucking working in the gardens. And I still feel like I know you. I guess I can say I know you now, but it's like I knew Chris too. So I got to say, I just thought he was like disengaged or bored or maybe tired of you picking on him. I didn't pick up the first time through at all because he was so apparently strong in his recovery. It just didn't dawn on me, much like it didn't dawn on you. But listening back now, it's fucking clear as day. It's so clear that it's remarkable that so many of us, listeners, people in his life, weren't aware of it, or at least until the very end. So I know it's hard for you to revisit, but people who are listening to this is probably like, what happened? How did it happen? As much or as little as you want to go into that. And because I really want to get to, in his death, you have this beautiful organism that is the podcast and the Dopey Nation. And the reason I'm talking to you today, the reason I know dozens of people in recovery all over the world is because of this show and his death. So can you take us through that and then maybe get into what's grown, what's sprouted from, the ashes? Yeah,
I mean, that's one of the worst parts that is the worst part of the whole thing. I mean, Todd dying was terrible, but Todd never had any time, and Todd never, I don't know, he never enjoyed recovery. And Chris and I built this whole, organism, this whole, like, whatever, fake brand, this whole show based on the fact that we were enjoying our recovery. So when he turned the corner, I didn't see it. And I mean, like, I have a lot of excuses, for why I didn't see it, but I'll take you through it as best as I can. Both of our lives had changed a ton in the time we had done the show. I had gotten back together with Linda. That year we were, she had gotten pregnant and we were looking for a house. He was in a program to become a PhD in psychology. And I guess they break it up into a master's program and then the PhD program. and he was finishing up his master's program. He was working in a sober house in Great Barrington. He was an intern at a school, and he had just taken a job as a sober companion for his sister's company. All the while, he had gotten into a serious relationship with this medical student from Harvard and moved in with her. So we're talking about like as much action as two lives could handle at one time. And at the end, you know, the majority of the shows we had done remotely, either on Skype or on the phone. And but I'll say this, and I think I've talked about it on the show a little bit. I mean, his story in the end was he went on vacation. This is the story he told, you know, and I don't know what's true or not true, and I think that's what you're dealing with when you deal with drug addicts and relapse and death. You know, you don't know what the real story is. With him, the story that I do know is that him and Annie went to Anguilla, he pronounced it Anguilla, and he told me the story that he was trying to get in shape with her and doing all this dieting and going to the gym, and I always made fun of him for it. And he said he went with Annie to the gym, and he wanted to show her how high he could karate kick, and he tore something in his leg below his ass, and he would always say, I broke my ass, I hurt my ass. And he would complain about it to me from time to time, but I just didn't really think about it because I had a baby on the way and a house, and I had just, like, my job had changed, and, you know, I was just kind of doing my thing, and I wasn't particularly concerned about Chris's ass pain. And he, at the same time, like I said, had all those things going on, so it was very hard to know what was happening. Although I did feel like him drifting away from the show, and it was very upsetting to me because I just figured he was done. And I think the show was magical mostly because, like you said, he could handle me picking on him, and he would be, if you're into the show, he could pick on me, you know, it could go back and forth. But he just started to it seemed like he started to lose interest. But then one of the great, beautiful ends of the show was that we bought this house, and he came out to the house, and we recorded 3 episodes of Dopey. I think it was in the 130s, and they were like some of the best episodes we had ever done, and we were just full of this joy and energy and good times. And it was after that, I think we did one on the phone, and then we did the Artie Lang episode. And we had tried to get Artie on the show for years. And I finally pinned him down, and Chris was like, I can't do it. And Chris had been drifting away, like he couldn't come to the city, he couldn't do anything, he was barely talking to me, and I couldn't possibly imagine he was using. I was just fairly certain that he was like losing interest. And then around the same time, a buddy of his who actually designed the Dopey logo hit me up, and he's like, what's up with Chris? And Todd had just died. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, he just called his sponsor, and he thought he was talking to you. And I like freaked out, and I called him up, and he basically like just said he had been up all night studying, and I just believed everything. And so did his sponsor, and so did his friends. And his girlfriend, I think, Annie, like started to suspect a little bit worse. And when the Artie Lang show came around, he was like, dude, I can't do it. You got to get it another time. And I was like, fuck you. I'm doing it. You know, if you don't want to come, don't fucking come. I don't care. Because I wanted Artie on so bad. So he came, but for the first time, he didn't drive to New York. He took a bus. And he showed up looking like shit. And again, he was complaining about his ligament or whatever. And at Artie's, he was weird, and he was not friendly, and he was not himself. But I didn't pick up that he was using. Yes, in retrospect, it's obvious.
Artie Lang is like the biggest get, you know, the Stern connection, the drugs, the story, the fanfare, the drama. So, like, you're to be excused for maybe not having your thumb on the pulse of whether Chris was high or not. You were at Artie's house, right?
Yeah, we went to his apartment in Hoboken. but I was more than that. I had a baby at home. We had just bought a house. Like, it was like ridiculous pressure everywhere. And, but we went out there and he was a mess. But I was just really focused on getting the best appearance from Artie, setting up the gear, you know, keeping my thoughts intact. You know, it's a lot, you know what I mean? And after the interview, we actually took a ferry back across the Hudson, and he was just not himself. And I was like, do you want to go eat? And he was like, no. And he never didn't want to go eat. So I was like, I felt like the show was over. And it was like right then, the next 2 episodes we did on the phone, and the first one was okay, but not really. And I started having to tell more stories because he wasn't paying attention. And I remember he made us play like a 20-minute voicemail, and I was like, what the fuck is this? And I just felt it falling apart, you know. And I confronted him because I couldn't handle it. And he was getting high and he couldn't tell me. And we basically bickered, you know, we bickered for a while. And then it was actually the night before he died. We got into this crazy, crazy fight. And he blamed it all on Annie. And then he started it was like this very beautiful thing. It was almost like providence that it could happen. But he was like, all I want to do is do Dopey. I don't care about school. I don't care about anything. It's the only thing I care about. And I knew he meant it because I knew how much he got out of it. I knew that Dopey was the ultimate comeback for him, where all of his mistakes turned into his strengths. And he knew it too. But meanwhile, what I didn't know was that he was like relapsing like a crazy person. You know, he had fentanyl, he had coke, he had pills, he was drinking, he was smoking cigarettes, he was out of hand. And the night before he died, he was just like, he said, I love you. Like, it was the most beautiful thing. He was like, I love you. And I was like, I love you too, but I got to go to bed. And then Annie hit me up and she was like, I'm worried about Chris. Can you check on him? And I woke up at, I think it was 6:12 in the morning. I woke up, and whenever I would text Chris, he would always text me right back, like whenever it was. I texted him at 6:12 in the morning, and I said, dude, are you all right? And he texted me, I'm all right. I'm not great, but I'm alive. I'll talk to you later, okay? And like 4 hours later, Annie called me and told me she found him dead. And I was just like, I didn't believe it.
Man. Wow. I mean, I've heard you tell this story a number of times on the pod, and it never is anything less than excruciating to like relive on my end. So I can only imagine what that's like for you. Again, deep bow of gratitude for going there, and of course condolences. And yeah, man, it's like I often think of Chris like I think of, say, you know, even more so Philip Seymour Hoffman, of these people that were so deep into their recovery and it was in the rearview mirror and they were on to grander things, and were these stories of resurgence, and then just like in an instant it can be over. And in the fentanyl era, I mean, shit, yeah. Prince, Mac Miller, Tom Petty, and then of course the thousands of Chris's out
Todd's,
there,
whatever.
Todd's, yeah, of course. And you know, that's what keeps me right is fear of death. And Chris is a big part of that. And so is Dopey Podcast, man. And I said it before and I'll say it again. It is such an invaluable resource to people in all areas of the affliction, from those steeped in the deepest recovery that pop on and announce their 10, 20, 30 years, shedding insight and information in the Facebook group or on Reddit, or the folks that often call in or write into the show who are deep in it, and like you're their hope, and Chris is their patron saint. And so in death, Dopey turned a corner and has become really a unicorn. There's nothing on earth like Dopey Podcast. Forget the recovery community, just period. And it's liberated so many people to just confront and themselves, their addiction, their pain in the past, You know, like I found Dopey shortly after I had done some time in jail. And in that time, I lost my dad and I carried a lot of pain with that. And I might have put that into drugs. But like hearing other people's tales, hearing you talk, you've referenced your mother's death and the role and all that a number of times on the show. And I connected with that. And I just think that Chris's death is such a profound example of how, slippery the slope is and how precious life is. But you, I mean, you've been given this impossible task of taking the show on, and you couldn't give it up. It meant too much to too many people. Chris, more than anyone. But now you're this master interviewer. You're this persona in the recovery community. You're invited to music festivals. There are recovery scholarships in Chris's memory and with Dopey's, involvement. It's just amazing that you went from a dude who's like, girl wouldn't let him tell fucked up stories on the air to like this, you're really a beacon of hope and somebody that matters to so many people. And frankly, I don't know that it would have really played out like that if Chris had not passed. So in death, there's this amazing gift to all of us and to you. And what can you just kind of reflect on how you navigated, not so much his death, you've talked about that a lot on the show, and I don't want to keep making you go somewhere painful, but just the aftermath for the show and kind of take us up to the here and now, whether it be the guests that you get or the profile you have or what it was like to get to 2 and 3 million downloads and stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, first of all, like, and it might be obvious or whatever, but like, it would have been much better if he hadn't died. It would be like, it would just, the show wouldn't have gotten as big as it is, but it would have been infinitely more fun. And I didn't want him to die, you know what I mean? And like, whenever I hear, I mean, the funny thing is whenever I hear anybody like send in a voicemail or write me an email and they end it, toodles for Chris, it just makes me realize how kind of he touched people and how we touched people. And like, it's just like, I can be in denial about like the way the show affects people or whatever, but when they say it, I hear it. So like, yes, it's definitely true that Chris dying helped a ton of people, but it fucking sucks that it had to happen like that. Yeah, and people learned from it, and like, yeah, we were like idiots having a good time, but I think that was a great message in itself, period. Like that you could be an IV drug addict in recovery and still have a good time. Like that was a good message. Then the message kind of changed to, if you fuck around, you can die like Chris did, or like Todd did, or like this guy Dave Marshall, or that dude Andrew, or whoever. There was a list of people dying as we led up to Chris dying, and which was very hard. And Todd's death was sobering, and Chris's death was just insanity. And after Chris's death, it was just like, I wasn't going to stop doing the show. I'd always wanted to have a fucking talk show, and I did. And I had an audience, and I was in recovery, and like, I couldn't walk away from the audience, and I couldn't walk away from Chris, and I couldn't walk away from what we had built. So I kept going. And, like the bittersweet part is, it's hard to laugh like we used to laugh. And that was for me, that was my favorite part of the show, was the laughing, was like the ridiculous, like fun. But, Linda's always like, the show can't always be fun. It's about drug addiction. People die, blah, blah, blah. And so I just needed to figure out how to make the show work, and when Chris died, I was just like, if the show sucks, or if it's boring, or I don't like doing it, I'm going to stop. And for the first couple months, it was not great, and it was hard, and it was very painful. And I realized I needed help. And my buddy Sam, who I'd gone to treatment, like volunteered to start listening to it all the time and help me understand what it was. And that was a great help to the show. And then just like weird random shit started happening. Like I ran into Mark Maron, and he was just like, yeah, I'll do it, like instantly. And I ran into Jamie Lee Curtis, who refused to do it when Chris was alive, but when she heard Chris had died, she wanted to do it. And then Bob Forrest hooked me up with the drummer from Guns N' Roses, Steven Adler, and just weird people just started coming out of the woodwork to come on the show. And I kind of realized in my head that the only way the show could function is if I also had a friend on. So I started just putting random friends on. And so you'd still feel that authentic vibe, but you'd still get these stories, and we'd always get voicemails. And the show just kind of consolidated itself based on the trauma that was shared by the listeners. Like, I think everybody who ever listened to an episode kind of stopped listening, and then when they heard Chris had died, they wanted to see what happened. They wanted to pay respects. They wanted to mourn him. And even bigger than that, that's when a couple of fans in the Dopey Nation were like, we need to make a fan group. And Andrew G and Paulina and Catherine were like, we got to make a Facebook group. And they asked me, and I was like, do it, but I don't want to really have anything to do with it. And it was really a group meant to mourn Chris. And that group came about, and, a couple thousand people joined it, and it became this sort of stronghold of goodwill, good vibes, and, recovery, addiction, and dumb shit. And all those things kind of echoed back and forth. And since the beginning, I've always been like an attention whore, and I've always tried to get stories about Dopey. And I wrote This American Life about Dopey when Chris was alive, because I thought Dopey was a good story when Chris was alive, and they ignored me. But when he had died, I wrote them again, and they thought it was a good story. So when This American Life did their piece on us, 5-6 million people listened to it, and we managed to keep a little bit of the audience, which pushed it again up the hill.
Yeah, that's sort of the tipping point for the group, the Dopey Nation, and just the sort of narrative of the podcast. Chris, his passing, your sort of 40 years in the desert in between that and This American Life. And then since This American Life, there's obviously a ton of newbies and curious Georges and such, who are just poking around because they were taken by the story. But when you were talking about the laughter, there's a certain register, like a guttural laugh that you had with Chris that we miss. I feel like it just doesn't come out of you anymore. And I think that that's sort of just something you shared with him. And it was really beautiful. And I didn't really notice it that much until you started playing some older clips of, those chopped and screwed ones.
Yeah.
And I think that those are really amazing snapshots into what was so special about your relationship on the podcast. And with regard to the This American Life, I mean, I think that there are a lot of the hardcore old school Dopey fans who are almost in a way resentful that there was this sort of Dopey for Dummies 30-minute little narrative that went out to all these millions of people, because so many people, none more than yourself and those around you, had lived through the trauma and pain that made it this captivating story. And I think that over time has subsided, and a good number of people that maybe found the show that way or found the Dopey Nation that way are still involved, and many of them are, vibrant members of the community. So I'm a fan of This American Life because that really pushed you to a different stratosphere as a podcaster. Because I have this podcast and it's my baby, and I look up to you, man. I admire and really respect you as a podcaster, and I've been able to watch you grow and evolve and sort of hone your craft. Do you feel like you have the talk show you always sought after, or do you envision yourself still having that traditional Johnny Carson kind of situation?
I never wanted a Johnny Carson. First of all,
Stern.
No, first of all, I want to say this. The laughter from Chris, I think it hasn't been replicated, but whenever there's a close friend on, it's the crazy laughter with Chris would mostly happen because what we would do is we would get together once a month and we would record 3 or 4 episodes. So that's 3 or 4 hours of recording. So it would be on the 3rd or 4th episode that we would record the dumbest shit because we'd run out of stuff and we'd be tired. would be like 1 a.m. and we'd be delirious. And that's where like the good laughs would come and just the real dumb shit would come. So like it was like a weird secret weapon that was also a weakness kind of thing. So that's important to mention because I don't do the show like that anymore. I like do the show every week when I can, you know? And definitely the show is not what I want it to be. Like I always envisioned it, even with Chris when he was alive, I would tell him all the time, I want the show to be like a daytime talk show where we do it exactly the way we did it in a kitchen and it's chill and you have musical guests and you like go to rehab and people in early recovery do karaoke and you have bands and you have cooking segments and like it's like real real Regis Philbin kind of thing. Like I love how Howard does his show, but I never liked that dark studio vibe. Like it's too like strippery. Like I'd want it to be more of like a house, like relaxing, like you're chilling, and whatever that looked like, you know. And I still want. I mean, like the biggest difference between what it is and what I want it to be is I work in a deli still. I do the show in between my work. Now with this whole COVID thing, I do all of my interviews on the phone, which sucks. Like you wanted to do this in person, I wanted to do it in person, but who knows when people will be around each other again. So like. I mean, I have such a dream of like this being a talk show. I'm not the biggest Joe Rogan fan, but I would love his reach. I would love his success. I would love to do it 4 days a week. I just, I have big dreams of it being like relaxing, like a place. Like that was the other point of Dopey was it was a place where addicts didn't feel alone. Which is what I got from Stern. What I got from Stern is when I listened to Howard, I felt like I was with my friends. And that's what I wanted Dopey to feel like to other people. And I think that's our biggest success. Our biggest success is that people listen and they feel less alone. Like, I don't think I was ever, like, the smartest or most funny person, but it was like you felt like you were hanging out with somebody you knew. And I tried to emulate Howard, who did that for me. And that's what I would want Dopey to be, and I would love to not fucking work in a deli. As much as I've loved working at Katz's, I would love it to be a career, and I would love people to want to come on. Like, I've had so many people on the show who didn't want to come on, and it sucked. You know, the best guests are the guests that want to come on, not the guests that do.
Copy that, man. Yeah, it's a weird thing, the whole podcast game, and like, yeah, you working in Katz. I love that Katz's is a part of the story. I remember when my parents first took me there when I was a little kid, went to a play, went to Katz's, and
yeah,
a huge fan of the Jewish deli. Yeah, again, another symbiotic connection between you and I. So one of the things that I think is so essential is the fact, I am somebody who struggled and was addicted to pharmaceutical opiates for a long time, and I haven't been for a long time. And
right.
I still smoke weed regularly. I use, kratom and occasionally psychedelics, but I'm still welcome, not only in the Dopey Nation, but there's no dogma with Dopey Podcast. There is this new sort of progressive, harm reduction influenced, you call it the alt recovery movement, and it's just sort of a loosely defined thing as I understand it, but that, and you've had like, say, Stephanie Whittles Walks on the show, and people who listen to my show might remember her late brother, Harris Whittles, who passed away from heroin, and she came on your show and talked at length about his life, and then you went on her show and did, a shorter, more succinct version of what we're doing. And I think that I know I speak for a number of people in the Dopey Nation that like those two podcasts, hers and yours, exist in this sort of new alt recovery harm reduction approach. And it's very welcoming and it's very inclusive and it doesn't make people feel like, shit or shame. But I also know that that's not your path. You work the steps and are totally abstinent, yet you espouse a more empathetic or lenient approach in the alt recovery movement. You do it one way, but you support and in essence like wave the alt recovery flag, and that's a big part of Dopey.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And it wasn't always like that. You know, in the beginning, uh, I would like give people shit who were on methadone or Suboxone or smoke weed or whatever because maybe I was jealous and also because I never could do anything. Like I could never take methadone respectfully or responsibly or effectively is the word, or Suboxone. If I ever took anything, I used everything. And basically, when Chris would talk about how people could do medicated assisted treatment, and I would be like, "You're full of shit." Like I had a lot more leeway when he was alive that I could say whatever I wanted, and but he really like laid it down. He was like, "Dude, if it's helping people, then what the fuck?" And I was like, "That's true," and statistically, there's so much more success in people using medicated assisted treatment than abstinence. And it's like, who am I to dog somebody who's like getting by in this world? The world is so fucking difficult, especially if you're an addict and you figured out a way to have some peace and not destroy your life. It's like, fuck, who am I to say anything besides good for you? And what happened though with the alt recovery movement was, every few feet I get ahead in Dopey, I kind of get worried about it falling back. And I think it was last summer, and I was talking to Sam, and I was like, I don't know, I think we're losing something. But it also seems like a lot of people have gotten clean just from listening to Dopey. What if we started some Dopey movement kind of thing that just helped people get clean just with vibes or whatever? And then, I was like, maybe we could set up a foundation and help addicts some way, and nothing really was clicking in my mind. And then, we decided to do DopeyCon, and Mountainside offered to pay for it and put it on. And they were like, do you want to? And DopeyCon was the first live Dopey, and 100 Dopey fans came to this, this swanky brownstone in Manhattan. And I had a bunch of speakers and musicians, and it was fun. And then Mountainside, we were like, we want to give a scholarship away. And I was like, And I was like, maybe I could get some more scholarships. And but I put it on the back burner, and I got this email from this woman in New Hampshire named Jamie, and she was on Suboxone, or Suboxone, however you properly pronounce it. And she was like, I'm not abstinent, I'm not clean, but I haven't used dope in X amount of time because of Dopey, and I feel that Dopey is at the vanguard of the alt recovery movement. And I was like, what? I was like, the alt recovery movement, that sounds like something. And my dad tried to trademark it, and and then it just kind of became this thing, which was like, if you want to get clean, by any method you can do it. By any method you can improve your life, do it. Whatever it might be. And like me and Sam would talk about it all the time. And, as a 12-step person, which I am, Sam isn't, I would just be like, well, my 12-stepness is folded into the alt recovery movement. And since then, I was like, I want to give away a scholarship every month. And we've given away 4 scholarships this year just through goodwill. Turnbridge in Connecticut gave us one, Mountainside gave us one, Aloe gave us one, and this Transcend Recovery gave us one. And that's just I can't even believe it, to be honest with you. It's like, yeah, we help people, but we've actually managed to give away probably almost $500,000 in treatment to dope fiends who needed to go somewhere. And it's just cool. I never would have suspected us doing anything like that.
I mean, that's fucking magic, dude. Seriously, I was so proud when that started happening. And I gotta say, there are a number of personalities on the show and in the group that have sort of come to life, whether it's through voicemails or calling in or whatever it is. And you've always really been, incredible resource to people that just needed to talk. I think of the one guy that's on your show a bunch, Jeremy from down there in Baton Rouge, who was the recipient of one of maybe the first scholarship, and just his journey and his ability to communicate that via the show is another just incredible facet to the experience, and his just emblematic of so many people's, and it's something that you should be really fucking proud of and hang your hat on. And of course, Chris and Todd and their stories and their roles in this journey have a major part of those scholarships coming to fruition. So you got to think that they didn't die in vain. Like they're helping people, and I think maybe that's why I'm so attached. Why I have these emotional reactions when I hear a song or think about them or listen to old footage, and you hear a lot of that when people call into the show or write. And I think that that's a testament to just this platform and community and vibration that you put. It's so funny because, the guy that started Dopey and the guy with Chris, yourself back then and you now, it's just such an evolution. And it's never more so on display than when you are talking about your family, or you have your father Alan on, or you have your partner Linda on, or her mother. I wanted to just ask about because you're clearly so happy now. And that's one of the things I've always kind of wondered is, like, if I ever got all the way sober, would it be any fun? Could I still have fun? Like Wilson, can you still have fun? I just wondered. And now I get to watch and listen and sort of live vicariously through you, this fulfilling and rewarding life of total abstinence and sobriety and working the steps. What brings you joy? How do you find those fucking laughs and those moments of life, not fucked up? Because obviously you do in abundance.
Well, first of all, like, it's available, it's like, I'm an idiot, and it makes me think of, like, Harry Potter, where Dumbledore is like, if you ever need me, I'm always available. You know what I mean? He says that when he gets kicked out of the school, I think, something like that. And that's not me, but recovery is always available to anybody, and it's free, and I never enjoyed recovery in my past. I always just saw it as a speed bump to my life. Like, I like to be fucked up. I saw herb as my lifeblood, and then dope became my, obsession, and then benzos became like my tool of shutting things down. And in the end, took a little while, in the end, basically, I was smoking weed and taking an occasional pill here and there and trying to reconcile with Linda, and she caught me with pills and took away custody again, right? I was 41, and I had gotten custody to the point where my older daughter would spend weekends with me. And basically, I remember I was in my kitchen on Clinton Street in Manhattan, and it was the summer, it was August, and I was chain smoking Marlboros, and I was writing this, and Linda had taken away custody, and I was writing this email to her in my kitchen. It's hot as hell. And I remember just begging her to let me smoke weed in the email. Like, I won't do anything else, but I need to smoke weed. I love weed. I don't want to not smoke weed. It's part of who I am, and I don't know. I had a moment, like you hear about these moments that people have. I had this moment, and I saw myself sitting in this kitchen writing this desperate email to my daughter's mother, begging for her to give me permission to smoke pot. I had smoked pot for 20 years, 20 years straight every day, except for when I was in treatment or in jail or whatever. And I realized it was absurd. Like, what was I fighting for? I was 41 and I was a waiter, and I had very little in my life, and yet I was just begging to hold on to this thing. And I kind of saw myself, and I was like, fuck. And I went to a 12-step meeting, and I didn't want to get clean, and I didn't want it to be my first day. They were like, is this your first day? And I was like, I don't want it to be my fucking first day. I'm just a tourist, And I got home, and I was like, I think I need to make a change. And I had jars and jars of nuggets. Like, I had the fantasy that I had always wanted, which was like a cabinet full of jars of different strains, of big jars and little jars, and shattered and hash and keef and everything I'd always wanted, And I called one of my edibles, and I called one of my best friends, and I was like, "Come over, I'm going to give you all my weed." And he came over, and I gave him all the weed, and I went to a 7:30 meeting the next morning, and some dude was like, I told him my story about my family, and he was like, "We would love it if you came back tomorrow." And nobody had ever said that to me at a 12-step meeting, so I was like, fuck it. And I started going there every morning. And in the beginning, like, I would wake up at 5 in the morning. It's incredibly uncomfortable, and I was not joyful. But I think in time that changed. I think I'm a joyful person deep down, and I think I got used to being sober, and I started to work the steps, and I got some peace out of it. And I don't like to be miserable. I don't like to be unhappy. And I think whenever I was unhappy, it was almost as an excuse to get high. And I had decided I wasn't going to get high. So I was like, stop fucking doing that. Like, talking to my brain, stop fucking playing this game, because you're not going to get high. So you might as well find some joy somewhere else. And that's when it hit me, which was I was 41 years old, and I had gotten high for half of my life, and I had nothing to show for it. And I was like, well, what would happen if I didn't get high for 20 years? Like, what would I have to show for that? And I was like, and that seemed like an interesting idea. 41 is like, on the road to middle age. And I was still definitely a fucking idiot kid. And I was just like, I want to see what 20 years without anything does. And also, I was so in love with the counterculture and getting stoned and just everything about it. And when I started to get clean, I would pantomime smoking a joint. Like, I would hold an imaginary roach between my thumb and my forefinger, and I would hit the roach, like, imaginary, and I would get high because I knew every inch of what getting high was. I knew how it would burn my fingers. I knew how it would burn my throat. I just knew how it would feel, and I knew how my brain would react to it. And I had been there before. There was nowhere I was going to go. So I was just like, I just found joy, and I found joy in getting time. I felt pride in getting time. Within a little while, within a few months, I had, Linda had come back, which I didn't expect. I got to be in my daughter's life, which I always got just like crazy joy just from hanging out with her, which I still do. Now I get it from the baby, but the baby's a pain. But just being responsible, just turning the corner and surviving. And then making Dopey was like just the best. I'm so excited to make Dopey. Whenever I see something inspirational, like the Beastie Boys documentary, I always wanted to be in the Beastie Boys, And I feel like Dopey is like almost as good. It's like my chance to be me and do what I want. And I get joy in making stuff, and I get joy in relationships and friendships and love and all that stuff. Music.
I always wanted to be the fourth Beastie too, man.
No, I wanted to be Ad Rock. I just wanted to be Ad Rock. I waited on him at Katz's, and I was like, dude, I waited on him and Mike D at Katz's. And I was doing a talk show at Katz's at the time, and Ad Rock told me he would come on my talk show. And I had planned the whole thing out. Like, I was going to do lyrics from License to Ill as I waited tables and try to get people to do the lyrics. And then he never responded to my email. And I was, like, devastated. And years later, he came back in, and I was like, what the fuck happened? And he was like, I know. I said I was going to do it, and I didn't do it. I'm a dick. And I was like, don't worry about it. But it was crazy,
Oh, that's amazing, man.
I know. It's so funny.
Yeah, I love the Beasties so much, I could only imagine. I've actually watched that, whatever, Tales of a Jewish Waiter or whatever. I've watched a few of those on YouTube. You've given me so much time I feel bad, but I'm so grateful.
No, I was excited to do it. I
Dude,
wouldn't have done it like this if I didn't want to. I hope I
yeah.
didn't drag it out too
No,
much.
no, this
I
is
wanted to enjoy
fucking
it.
great. I totally have enjoyed it. And, I really admire, your candor, your bravery, your ability to just, like I said, show your whole, world and your family and you're the fearless leader, if you will.
Well,
And
fearful neurotic leader, whatever you want to call it, you know. But I think the reason that the community really touched so many people was it was everybody's ability to get honest. Chris's ability to get honest, Todd's ability to get honest, Linda's mom, Linda, my dad, everybody just was straight up. And that's why people got so attached. And, that's the joy of the truth. You know what I mean?
yeah, man, you're only as sick as your secrets is something I was always told, and I firmly believe. And in my own life, I found that as soon as I got honest with myself and those around me, things got better. But I still got a ways to go, not only with my journey with substances, but just in general. So, like, even just sitting down and rapping with you while you walked around suburbia, it was really rewarding for me. And I know it will be to listeners to my show and maybe a few folks from yours that find their way over here. So one day we'll do it in person. We'll chop it up about all the music, all the reggae. But, this was just such a joy and a privilege. And I'm so honored that you gave us so much time and so much of yourself. And that goes for what you do with Dopey, man. You give so much time and so much of yourself. And it's truly in service, man. And I know along the way you've had to make a lot of amends and you've had to kind of face a lot of skeletons in your closet. But in doing that so publicly, you embolden so many thousands of people, myself and many people I know included. I've brought a number of people over to your podcast into the Dopey Nation, and they often remark just how much they appreciate and lean on the show and the sort of diaspora. So I'm going to end it with that, just a deep bow of gratitude and just honor of your service. And
I want to say one more thing before we stop, which is that, I say it on the show once in a while, but that Dopey is almost nothing without the Dopey Nation. We're nothing without listeners, and our listeners actually contribute. And you're one of the great contributors to the show. And, like, you're a huge piece of the puzzle, like it or not. You carry your own flag through it. And I mean, that's why I was so excited to do the show, your show, because, like, I know that you're a part of our show. You know what I mean? It's meaningful. Like, it's just as meaningful as anything else. I love it when you send in a message and you have theme music and, like, you're about it. It's like, it's all part of the same thing. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you having me on. It means a lot to me.
right on, my brother. Well, the feelings are mutual, man. And I love, I just love being one voice of so many. But I think that the messages you get of people, whether they're going through it or they just got through it or they're reliving some real debauched time in their lives, it's just an outlet. And it's an outlet for me. And I know it's an outlet for many people that don't get to leave their voicemails or write in. It still works for them. And man, onward and upward, dude. Please, I was going to say give Linda my regards and give her, my fiance Alicia's regards, because Alicia's very fond of Linda. And
Nice.
when I mentioned you were coming on and somehow Linda came up, she said, "Oh, she's my sister in this." So
Nice.
I was like, right on. Maybe one day we'll all get a proper hang. Post-COVID era. Oh, yeah. Last thing. You had the COVID.
Yeah, I did.
How are you doing with that?
I still can't. I don't smell anything, and my taste is a little bit off. But I had a fever for like a week, and I had a bad sore throat. But my case has been nothing compared to what other people have had to deal with. So I'm doing okay, and my family's doing great. And send my best to yours. And I hope I didn't go on too long. You know what I mean? I just figured if you wanted to hear the story, I would tell it to you the way it happened.
Dude, I mean, like you said in the beginning, I'm a fan of the deep dive, and you've done a number of podcasts. I've listened to many besides your own, but like, I really appreciate like the Dave that you brought to this. You were so engaged. You were so real, so honest. Like I said, I feel like I know you, and I hope that transfers to the people that listen, and one day we'll do it again a little further down the journey.
All right, man. No problem. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to hear it.
Well, be well, stay healthy, and stay strong, stay safe, stay socially distant. I got to end with me not say toodles.
Yeah, right. Fucking that. Yeah, it's crazy. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris. Right.
Right on, man.
Half of my life I spent doing time for some motherfucker's crime. The other half found me stumbling around drunk on burgundy wine. But I'll get back on my feet someday. The good Lord willing, if He says I'm I know that the life I'm living's no good. I'll get a new start. Live the life I should. I'll get up and fly away. I'll get up and fly away, fly away.
I'll get up and fly away. Want to say thank you to my man Dave from the Dopey Podcast for that just deep, profound, emotional, and inspiring tale of through the darkness and into the light. So let that be inspiration to us all. And big love to Dave and the Dopey Nation. I want to shout out some of my peeps, like the Colleens and Julie in Seattle, and my man Jeremy in Baton Rouge, Misty. You all know who you are. Really just incredible community. Humbled to be a part of it. And, you know, if you were wondering out there what's up, and this is kind of made you a bit curious, please come check out the Dopey Nation. Listen to Dopey Podcast. Dave drops one every Friday night. It's like Shabbat. So with that, what was I going to follow that up with other than a wharf rat, right? I mean, that was a wharf rat story, and it deserved a glorious wharf rat crescendo, namely Hartford, Connecticut, May 28, 1977. Now, a few weeks back marked 4 years since I had last used pharmaceutical opiates. It's crazy to think. It was to make it 4 days at a point in time was an eternal struggle. So, coincidentally or cosmically or spiritually, the actual last day that I used was the day that Prince died. And Yeah, that's how that worked. So, to commemorate the 4 years that I just reached, April 21st, I wrote a little something, journal entry that turned into a note on Facebook, and in the spirit of Dave's brutally honest and emotional and inspirational shares, and all those that have come on the Dopey Podcast and in the Dopey Nation and in the rooms around the world, I'm going to read this journal entry on the 4-year anniversary of my last using. And I'm going to cue up the appropriate song from Prince called Sometimes It Snows in April. And I'm hoping that the timing works out close enough to the length of the journal entry read aloud. So let me cue that up and read that to y'all, and then I'm going to hit you with another short interview from another sober warrior and spirit out there in the rock and roll culture. But first, Sometimes It Snows in April. April 21, 2020. Dearly beloved, today marks 4 years since I last used pharmaceutical opiates. The day that Prince died. Losing him finally broke me through. This period is the longest sustained abstinence since I first began taking painkillers in my early 20s. There were modest successes along the way. I'd had a couple of pretty clear years down in Jack's Beach, Florida a decade back, but inevitably I would always return to the pills and without fail become addicted again. Painkillers, specifically oxycodone, dictated my life terms, finances, my schedule, all of it to me for the better part of a dozen years, maybe even more, but at least that long. I was totally powerless over the addiction, and it prompted behavior I'm not proud of and made me a person I was ashamed to be. There were many nights that I wished I just wouldn't wake up the next day. OxyContin, and later Roxy's or Blues, single-handedly stood in the way between me and my dreams. Personal and professional aspirations, relationships, drove me away from my family. Addiction is like Groundhog Day, being stuck in the same nightmare day in and day out. It was like a broken record, with constant carnage, yet I could never see the light. And if I did, it always felt so far away, and the mountains between insurmountable. Along the downward spiral, I tried the Suboxone route a couple of times via a doctor, and later off the street, but real talk, I was never completely committed to the process. I always found an excuse or just outright lied to myself and others. Therefore, I yo-yoed through active using without any real resolve or results any time I tried to kick. Whether it was just a couple of lore tabs on top of a few beers or a daily intake of 5 Oxy 80s. The demon always needed feeding. The thirst to get right took precedence over anything else. I didn't go places or do things or take opportunities or make moves in life without my pills. I didn't relocate from Philly or that area for a long time because I was concerned about where and how I would cop my shit. Anytime I did go somewhere for longer than a day or two, I had to always account for and ration having enough meds to see me through. Without fail, I'd finish them faster than I'd predicted, and be forced to deviate from our group plan to go find something, or just start to sweat out the withdrawals till I could get back to wherever it is I was that I could cop. Each sequel to this horror show became more desperate and depraved. This routine played out in every situation of my life for years and years and years. Jazz fest, snowboard trips, fish tour, a sojourn to the Super Bowl, all ended in the inevitable withdrawal and frantic, humiliating search for pills. Rinse, repeat, into the abyss. I said all the right things, hollow promises to anyone who would listen. Swore up and down to all my people that I would get better. I lied through my teeth. I hurt and betrayed friends, said and did unthinkable shit to my parents. I became dishonest, distrustful, and disgusting. There are many, many skeletons in my closet from this period of time in my life, and sometimes they still haunt me. I've done okay to make amends to many of the people I hurt the most, to own my behavior, lies, and bad energy that I put out into the universe. There are a few stones still unturned, though. A couple of wounds are still open, and one day I do hope to heal those fractures too. The amends stuff, it's some of the hardest work, but it's also the most rewarding and heart-filling. In October 2014, I got arrested, unrelated, and I went to jail for a calendar year. Now, 5+ years in the rearview mirror, it's clear that my beginning to use pills again in that summer of 2014 definitely clouded the judgment I would have crucially needed to see the feds coming. In a way, getting popped saved me from another round of circling the drain of painkiller addiction. I got snatched off the street at the dawn of the fentanyl era. Gone were the days of pill mills, Pill Hill, or meeting the old man furniture delivery guy and trading a zip of beaster weed for his prescriptions. These days it's now Russian roulette in the streets. As we've learned from Mac Miller, Tom Petty, and of course Prince, and thousands of less famous yet equally special souls, the Fent Leviathan does not discriminate. Plus, at that moment in time, my karma was not exactly great. I was already backsliding towards active use again, and it was probably just a matter of time before I copped dirty pills on the street that killed me. Getting arrested and staying in jail for that year saved my life. No two ways about it. Thankfully, I did not use any drugs of any kind while I was on the inside, and I got a taste of actual sobriety for the first time in my adult life. It was while I was incarcerated that I truly began to process how the pills had, in essence, ruined my life, stolen my soul, and temporarily robbed me of all the inherent goodness that we are born with. From family issues or losing friends, blowing music media opportunities, ganja farms, and interpersonal relationships gone awry. Through the clarity of total sobriety while incarcerated, I was able to read the tea leaves, process and internalize my affliction. Straight no chaser for the very first time. And not just my addiction, but certainly it began there. The roots of my personal rebirth were in the ownership and transparency and honesty with myself and others. And a new life grew from the ashes of my incarceration experience. So I had a 1.5 years of opiate abstinence on this day 4 years ago, when I pulled my F-150 into the Tenderloin to finally get high again. The disease of addiction is sick and demented, so believe it or not, I felt like I'd, quote, earned it. A year in jail, losing my dad while I was on the inside, it had traumatized me. And I was emotionally vulnerable as the 1-year anniversary of his passing galloped towards me. Even though I spent all those excruciating days and nights coming to terms with the fact that this poison ruined my life, I was due a little cheat, right? I was by myself. Who would know? I deserved this. So I bought a couple of blues off one of the omnipresent lurking zombies, just like old times, insufflated them swiftly. I spent a few minutes sitting in my truck watching the junkies and the dealers in the Tenderloin do their thing. Truly a demoralizing sight if there ever was. I was about to catch the elusive nod when my phone notified me of a text from my mom. Prince was dead. Any sort of high was immediately extinguished with an overbearing sense of dread and sorrow. Prince! Gone. I just knew it was from this shit. We'd heard about his overdose a week or so earlier, an emergency plane landing and an ER visit. There was too much smoke to be no fire. And now this. I knew from the minute I got that text from my mom that the pills had killed him. I think a combination of the drugs and grief caused me to kind of lose track of space and time, a quasi-blackout. I don't really remember driving the 2+ hours back to Grass Valley that day. I have a vague image in my mind of vomiting out the driver's side door at a gas station. I do remember the feelings of shock and then shame that came over me like it was yesterday. But it's been 4 years, and here we are. Here I am, forever indebted to the love and support of my unwavering mother, my inspiring, loving, and understanding fiancé, wonderful friendships from across the miles, the years, trials, and tribulations. I am writing this today 4 years liberated from the demon of opiate addiction. For what it's worth, I am not sober, and don't intend to be. I have found that cannabis and kratom are integral components to my getting this far. Some in recovery may see those tools as crutches, and that's cool. There are many ways to skin a cat. One day, maybe I will become less reliant on those substances too. For some folks, total abstinence, that's the only way, and I admire and respect that path. For me, I yearn to find some balance, one that so often eludes those afflicted. For now, I have indeed navigated one that works for me. Today, and 4 years strong. An approach rooted in spirituality and harm reduction. Not religion nor dogma, just an authentic, essential connection to source. But alas, I haven't got it all figured out. Far from it. It's still one day at a time, and it will be for the rest of my blessed days on this rock with y'all. If you know anyone out there is struggling with substances, let them know there is help, and not just the traditional fellowships, though they are time-honored programs bent on saving your life. The help comes in different shapes and sizes, any and all walks of life, to help shepherd you through with wisdom, empathy, understanding, and action. There are people who've been there and who've lived through the loss of dignity, the darkness and depravity. Many of them have availed themselves to me along the way, and I aim to pay it forward. My door, ears, shoulders, and heart are always open to those suffering. Like I heard a wise Jedi say recently, you've got to go through it, not around it. I certainly left a trail of fire behind me, but today, I live to tell the tale. And now everywhere I go, there's a purple hue. It follows me, surrounding me like a protective shield. I know it's you, watching over me, each and every step of the way. Thank you, Prince Rogers Nelson. In death, you gave me back my life. May the four winds blow you safely home. Sometimes it snows in April.
All good things they say never last. Love is love till it's past. I wanna live beneath the dirt, where I'd be free from push and shove, like all those swarming up above. Beneath their heels I'll spend my time. I'll wriggle in the earth and dew. Shout your name into the wind. And sometimes I will think of you. Shout your name into the wind.
Yes, indeedy. want to say thank you to everybody that's tuned in to episode 33. I know it's been a heavy one, and wanted to hook you all up with a bonus conversation. One that I've been holding on to for a few months because it's also equally serious and beautifully human and deals with recovery and rock and roll. And that's my pal Keith Griner, an absolutely incredibly talented photographer and blossoming videographer, filmmaker. He's got a lot of talents, but I know him from taking pictures and his tremendous photography skills. We've worked together on projects with Live for Live Music and Swanee Halloween, and he was in the Bay Area for some Dead shows around Dead and Company, I should say, over New Year's in San Francisco, and also the Motet Carl Denson thing, which we did together, and actually I wrote a piece and used some of his photos graciously. So Keith and I sat down for an interview, and I didn't want to just tack it on to another interview. I wanted to wait for the right one, and I think even deep down I knew that would be Dave from Dopey, and it, took a few months for that to come to fruition. So even though it's been a long episode already and an emotional one, I wanted to give everyone an opportunity to hear Keith's inspiring and life-affirming story and rebound from oblivion to just at the real upper echelons of live music and jam band photography and beyond. I mean, there's nothing bigger than Bob Weir and the Rhythm Devils, Dead and Company, and they had him out for New Year's, and it was just a real joy to sit down and talk with him about that and his journey. So, coming up next, Fierce Photography's own Keith Griner, who's currently residing in Nashville, Tennessee. You're listening to a studio version of Dirt by The Fish from Vermont, the same song that I referenced when I spoke to Dave about his dearly departed friend Todd. So, with that, here comes Keith Griner on the Up for Life podcast, episode 33. And this is B.Getz. You're here in Oakland, California at the Vibe Junkie Studios, and we're back with the Up for Life podcast. And it's an honor and a privilege and an absolute joy to be sitting here with my friend, peer, collaborator, Mr. Keith Griner, a photographer who hails from Indiana but actually is currently residing in Nashville, Tennessee. Am I right?
Yeah, holding it down there in Nashville.
So that's a recent transition for you, and I know it wasn't something that you arrived at easy. I'm just curious, what was behind the move to Nashville? Because it's such a music city. I mean, that's what they call it. Obviously, there's a lot of opportunity for you there.
That was kind of my goal. I came up in my career in Indiana. That's where I'm from and where I've always lived, and I kind of felt like I had done what I had to do in Indiana, and that I was looking for the next opportunity, or to go somewhere that I could explore what comes next in my career. And for the last couple of years, I've worked with Darius Rucker, and then that led into working with Hootie and the Blowfish, and I've got a great relationship and friendship with his manager. So moving down there where they're located made sense, and that's led already to other opportunities and working with other artists out of Nashville. So, right now I've just gotten settled in and continuing to meet new artists, to network with other managements, and really just optimistic and about the future, and just seeing what happens next.
Yeah, man. I mean, there's few places as exciting for that in like your line of work or our line of work, and there's a lot of amazing musicians down there, friends of the show like Jen Hartswick, Chris Gelbuda, Steve Gorman, formerly of the Black Crowes. There's so many different musicians down there. There's obviously going to be amazing opportunities for you. So I'm just excited for you. I've been kind of following along this process with you moving through the social media, etc. So I knew that you had arrived there shortly before you came out here. Now I'm talking to you in my living room, in my home studio here in Oakland. So let's talk a little bit about what you're doing out here in the Bay Area. You had 2 nights with the Motet at the Fillmore with the co-bill with Denson, but you're out here with the Motet. Then you have Today to Chill, and then you've got 2 big nights of Dead and Company, basically in their hometown shows at the brand new Chase Center in San Francisco. So let's start the Motet. How did you sort of connect with those guys, and what is sort of the role that you're working with them?
I love those guys, man. I've known those guys for a handful of years, and I've been lucky enough to work with them at amazing venues like Red Rocks, and just do great shows with them. They're so talented. They're so much fun. And so I was just lucky enough to be coming out here to work with Dead & Co. the next couple of nights, and which presented me the opportunity to work with my friends in the Motet. And I had a lot of fun. There's not... there's very few iconic venues in the world that have such rich history like the Fillmore does.
So true.
And it was just absolutely amazing to walk around in that venue for a couple of hours, and not only look at the show posters that they have hanging, but really look at some of the iconic photography that they have hanging there, and just kind of take a stroll through the past, and take in that history, and just how amazing it was for artists, all of those artists that played there back in the 60s and the 70s, and of course continued through the decades, but really to look at that older stuff and just think about the music that was inspired in the Bay Area and that flourished, people like Joplin and the Dead and Jefferson Airplane and things like that.
Sure. Yeah, man, that's what made this place famous in terms of the music world. And it's really cool because you're talking about yesteryear, you're talking about today. The Motet are a very contemporary band. They're not playing covers or, they have an old sound, but they're not an old band. So it's a real now music with the Motet. But then, thanks to your relationship with them, you get invited to play such a historic room, or to shoot them playing in a historic room like the Fillmore. And it's funny because, we ran into a peer of yours, Jeffrey Dupuy, who's also out here, and he was visiting the Fillmore for the first time. He's also a very talented photographer who's come on the show. And both of you guys made these posts about, like, his was basically like a bucket list venue. Yours were like, look where I am, back where it all began. And I get maybe take things for granted a little bit because I have the pleasure and the privilege of going to these venues, particularly the Fillmore. Regularly, I live here, that I actually took 20 minutes myself and just made my way and look. I've seen those photos 1,000 times, that beautiful little hang area with all those pictures through history. But knowing how you guys were feeling about being there, I had to just spend a little bit of time in there myself, even though I had a million times, and just take a look at the photos and soak in the history. So yeah, you guys had that sort of effect on me, kind of, jaded veteran, remembering, wow, how lucky I am. So speaking of lucky, you've been kind of a shooting star in the jam music community as far as photographers go, I would say. I mean, a few years back, I've been doing this a long time. I've been writing about music online since '99, but I've only really seen you in action for the past few years, but now you're everywhere and you're working with everybody. So I want to take it back to the beginning a little bit. how you got into photography, maybe what caught your eye, no pun intended, early on that said, hey, I got a thing for this. And then how did you take that and sort of transition it to a music industry career in photography? So let's start at the beginning. How do you start with pictures?
I think there's I think it's kind of a positive story. I definitely have always believed that, endings are the opportunity for new beginnings. And that's where my life was 8 years ago. I had a major life change in a divorce, and I bought a point-and-shoot camera and decided to spend New Year's Eve with a band in our scene, McGee, and they were playing at the Pageant in St. Louis for New Year's. And I went to the show, had my little point-and-shoot, and just stood in the crowd, taking awful pictures from where I stood, but I had so much fun doing it that it kind of spurred the thought of, maybe I should buy a real camera, learn how to use that camera, and maybe go to a concert or two and take some pictures. So a couple of months after that, I saved up enough money to buy a camera, and so I picked up that camera, and I started going to local bars and shooting local acts every Friday and Saturday night. And, and that's kind of like where everything began. Like, I had this big empty space, inside me, in my life. And I wanted to fill that with something positive. And so photography was, it was that. What I filled that with. And, it was just something that I quickly became very passionate about. I worked with a couple local photographers, and they noticed very quickly that I
had
was
something special.
I was able to see things. I approach things with a perspective of, that wasn't how someone just usually stands there with the camera and takes a snapshot of something. I was searching for angles and compositions and things, and this is like early, right away. So yeah, maybe I did have a knack for it, something that I'd always had and just never realized, never had the opportunity, never held a camera in my hand, really. So this wasn't, there's a lot of people who's like, yeah, I was into photography from an early age, and, right. I always took pictures, and, my dad was a photographer or a family member. Like, I didn't have any of that. Like, this is just something that, kind of late in life that I stumbled on. So yeah, that's kind of how things got underway.
That's pretty amazing, because here we are. It's December 29th, so we're coming up on the anniversary of you shooting that Umphrey show at the Pageant, and I mean, now you're out here shooting the Kings. Basically, I guess there's two Kings, if you want to say. There's the Fish and there's the Dead, but they're the sort of champions of this music community and culture, the most successful, the highest profile. So to be an official photographer for Dead and Company on their hometown New Year's Eve shows in a brand new state-of-the-art $1 billion arena, it's a fucking hell of a ride. And man, just I'm going to just deep bow right now and just honor that trajectory, because as we both know, and we've talked about a lot this weekend, there's a lot of people who do what you do. There's a lot of photographers out there shooting these bands, commiserating, working with them, and sort of scrambling to find the work and the opportunities. So for you to have identified something as your passion and chased it, and obviously you haven't, quote, made it all the way, but you're at a really special and prestigious place in right here and now, and you know, people should, you know, really have a lot of respect and admiration for that, especially given through what you've lived through to get there. And we're going to get to that. I just wanted to touch on the photography side of things. I didn't know you'd started so late, and I didn't know it started as like just catching the bug at a concert. I mean, that makes it even more fairy tale, and like you say, like a positive story, because you didn't go to some school and learn all these classes about, you know, maybe eventually you did, but that wasn't how you got there. I mean, do you have any formal training?
Not particularly.
It's even better.
Yeah. Like I'm self-taught. Like, I parted ways with a company that I'd worked for a number of years, and which ended up giving me the opportunity to focus on this every single day. So it, you know, it quickly became you know, what my life revolved around, and I don't think that has ever diminished. You know, it is still the forefront of my life and where my focus is. You know, and I appreciate what you're saying. Like, you know, I have so much gratitude for this opportunity this weekend to work with Dead and Company. You know, and you know, I get to work next to someone that I have the most respect and admiration for in Jay Blakesberg.
Sure.
This weekend. And you know, just being able to work next to him is just such an opportunity, and something that I never take for granted. He has always been there as far as being able to reach out to him and ask for advice. And, you know, that is just amazing that someone that has been doing it as long as he has, you know, takes the time to teach, you know, the younger generations, the less experienced. And, you know, he's the most iconic Grateful Dead photographer in my opinion. Yeah. You know, I look at his pictures and I'm just absolutely amazed at, you know, the moments that he's captured over the years, and it's truly someone that I have the utmost respect for. And you know, this weekend's just going to be an honor,
and
you
a
know,
dream.
all the way around. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's parallel there, because, you know, Jake's story, Jay's Blakesberg story is not unlike yours in the sense that he found the joy at a Dead show, shooting for the hell of it, as, you know, in his teens. You know, he's written about it extensively online and such. But it wasn't like he was born and bred to be a cameraman, you know, with formal training and all that stuff. He was a deadhead who went to shows and shot some photos and was like, shit, I like this. And now he's a legend. And I think it's a testament to him as an artist, and as accomplished as he is, that he avails himself to people like you and says, hey, I'm going to open doors for these people, just like doors were open for me. And you're going to get to rub and watch him in action and see, you know, how he goes about his business. And you can't put a price on that.
There's a couple of things. There's two things that I have learned from him that I want to take with me and never forget. And the first is that it was 31 years after he shot his first Dead concert before he was hired by the Grateful Dead. And that puts a lot into perspective for me, that it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and, you know, sticking with something. And it takes all of that sometimes before you're going to see successes or get opportunities, and that to never give up on those goals. And it also gives me an added sense of gratitude for the successes that I have had thus far in my short career. The other thing that he has taught me is that passing on the knowledge to younger generations of photographers, people that are just starting out, showing them the ropes, answering their questions, giving them advice, even if they're not looking for it, just to point them in the right direction. That kind of camaraderie, that kind of brotherhood, I think is important. And I owe a lot of that to, hit what he has done working with me and seeing him work with others.
Interesting. Yeah, that's beautiful too. Just that you can see it like that and derive that sort of like goal-oriented motivation from his, 3 decades of shooting the culture before the dead themselves actually called him with a check. I mean, that's definitely food for motivation. So thank you for sharing that, and I hope that the people listening can maybe apply that to their own lives in terms of maybe long-term goals, staying focused, etc. One last thing in the music world, I'm just curious, might be putting you on the spot a little bit. Do you have a favorite artist or band to shoot? Not the one you like the best or whatever. Is there one that presents visually or an aura or an energy that you find like most fulfilling to capture on film?
Well, Humphreys McGee has always been an important part of my story. Outside of shooting those local bars, Humphreys McGee was the first band to ever give me my first photo pass to shoot a big stage.
Right.
So, that was just amazing. That to me was like, oh my God, these are the people, this is the reason why I'm doing this, and now I'm actually here to shoot them.
Right.
Then, continuing forward, starting to work with those guys, forging friendships with them, and, right now a long-term working relationship. So things really came full circle. And, they're an amazing band. They've always had an amazing light show. So that relationship has just been paramount through my career. And then, my first love and the band that I'm always just absolutely excited to go out and shoot is Fish. Fish has always, been the band for me, and it's an interesting time right now as we are approaching, the 20th anniversary of Big Cypress that many of us were at. So it's I think this time is been a lot of there's been a lot of reflection going on and strolling down memory lane, and I think that's gonna continue to be awesome. And it's
yeah, man. I mean, I couldn't agree more in terms of what a Fish looks like, and so I can only imagine what it's like with the photographer's eye to have those canvases and Kuroda, and even as you talk about Humphreys, I mean Jefferson Waffle for years. I mean, those guys, they're in essence band members and creating the visuals.
Yeah, and Ben Factor has just slid into that role with those guys now as their new lighting director, and it's almost like nothing's missed a beat because he knows their music inside and out, which is just something you don't see is a new guy step in on day one. Like he's been there for years. And
have it down, right?
Yeah. That's been absolutely awesome. And so, that has just been a continuation of amazing, production and light show with those guys and with their new lighting director.
Awesome. I want to talk a little more with you. A long time ago, I read something on our site on Live for Live Music, about your life and about recovery. And it was really amazing to see how open you were then. And I filed it away. I didn't even have a podcast then yet. But I was like, I got to talk to this guy about some of that stuff because it's no secret. I talked about it on when I had Jeffrey Dupuy, who we saw last night, photographer, also heavily involved in the recovery community in a professional capacity and has been in recovery for a long time as well, that I too have struggled with drugs, opiates specifically, pharmaceuticals. And I really am interested and participate in a lot of ways in the recovery community, even though I'm not totally sober. I have a lot of admiration for people who work in the music community that are sober and that, maintain the recovery and work it and help others. And you fall squarely into that category. And I noticed a lot of photographers. When you talk about Halloween even, Aaron Bradley's been very open about being sober, Josh Skoll, yourself. We already talked about Jeffrey. There's a lot of sobriety in photography, and there's a great deal of sobriety and recovery in the music culture, period. And we're still losing people left and right. So I want to take the rest of the time that we have and talk just a little bit about your journey. I'm not going to ask you to tell a bunch of war stories. If you want to, you're more than welcome, but this is more about the here and now. How'd you get here? How do you maintain it? I've been lighting joints up while we're walking around the neighborhood. You don't flinch. You're in the bars and in the clubs with people out of their minds all the time. It can't be easy. I just want to hear, how do you do it? And maybe some folks out there that are listening that are either freshly sober and just trying to figure out how do they maintain it, or some folks that might be struggling, that see you about to shoot dead and company, out here working, doing your thing, having lived through the nightmare you lived through. Maybe that'll inspire them to maybe take that next step. So I want you to share whatever you're comfortable with.
Well, first and foremost, the reason that I'm open about it isn't to parade it around. It is singularly so that anyone out there that is struggling knows that they're not alone. That I have experienced maybe what they're going through. I love the fact that I get messages from people that I've never met before that want to talk about recovery, especially in the music scene. And so it's important to know that you're not alone. Right now, I think that it's just absolutely amazing that we have Kindle and her friends have started Backline,
Sure,
which is an industry resource for people that are struggling with depression or suicidal thoughts, and that includes recovery.
Sure.
They go hand in hand. Mental health is an important factor in our society, but even more so in the music industry, because we don't have the same resources that a Fortune 500 company is going to have to offer its employees. We're often all subcontractors, and so we're in essence on our own. My story is not much different from a lot of people's stories. There's going to be a lot of similarities between, you brought up Jeffrey and Josh and Aaron. Their stories are pretty similar to mine in a lot of aspects, but yet all different.
Right.
My life was out of control. I had a lot of unmanageability. Everything was about in excess. My drug of choice was whatever you had, and I wanted more of it. It didn't matter. I used drugs and alcohol to escape my fears, to deal with my struggles in life, to celebrate my joys, everything. And I always wanted that kind of escape. I was maladjusted to life, and it took a long time until I found a way of dealing with all of those things in a manner that didn't include drugs or alcohol. I think one thing that's also important to touch on is that you can go anywhere and do anything when you have the right intentions, when you have the right mindset, when you're emotionally, mentally, healthy. And it took a long time of me building that foundation of my recovery before I started going back to concerts, before I started putting myself in those kind of situations. You know, now when I get in those situations, if I see someone that's out of control, I think, wow, that used to be me. You know, by the grace of God, there go I. Like, that could be me again. And I have to remember that as well. You know, and all of those things contribute to me maintaining, you know, a healthy sobriety today. Most of the time when I'm at a show, I'm there to photograph it, you know, and that gives me a sense of purpose, a sense of being, and something to focus on when I'm in those situations. So it's really easy to not let a lot of things like bother you when you're so busy doing something else. But that's not the case for everybody in sobriety. And the great thing about the jam scene is there's such a recovery community. You know,
Vibrant.
We've always had the wharf rats. Or always, but for many, many years, there's been the sober group at Grateful Dead shows called the Wharf Rats. Fish then spun their own group off called the Fellowship. And so many other jam bands have followed suit. And that just, it's a great support system.
So beautiful.
Within our scene. Festivals. There are festivals that have sober camping, Camp Traction, that have tables set up out in, you know, Halloween has the jellyfish that's set up out there in the meadow field. That is a place for people in recovery to kind of, you know, to socialize around. It lets people know they're not alone. There's other people just like them sitting right over there at the table. And if they need to go talk to them, they can. At set break, they're going to have a meeting.
Those are so awesome when you see those meetings.
There's a lot of yellow balloon groups.
We sat down with some of the old wharf rats at High Sierra last year. Again, more tears. These old sober dudes in their 70s. They were like the happiest, highest people at the event.
They're, you know, what you'll find is people in recovery are not a glum lot. Like, you know, most of the time it's people that have learned to love life, learn to love themselves, learn to love other people in a way that is so beautiful, just like you're talking about.
It's incredible, man. It really is. And, you know, I get a lot of inspiration from you too, man. For real, I've talked to you for a few years now, and we spent some quality time this week. And I just really think that you set a positive example professionally with how you carry it when you're working, and what we're talking about now with recovery. And that's an admirable thing when so much of the music culture is around imbibing.
My career relies on my sobriety. Without my sobriety, I'm not going to have a career.
Or more than that, even. Not only career, you might not have your health, you might not have a lady. There's a lot of things that you're not going to get if you don't have your sobriety.
That has to be first and foremost in my life. But at the same time, I'm very open-minded. You know, just because things don't work for me doesn't mean that it shouldn't or can't work for other people. I'm very pro-legalization. I'm very pro-marijuana. Like, I can't smoke because it doesn't work in my life. But I think that other people should have the opportunity to make that choice for themselves. You know, and I'm not here to tell someone that they have a problem with alcohol. That's not for me to decide. That is an individual choice, and each person, has to decide, if that is becoming a problem, and they have to decide that they want to do something about it because they're the only ones that can change their life. You can push someone, in that direction, but you can't make them change their life. You can't make them make that decision, and until they do, most people aren't going to grab on to sobriety. They're not going to, be honest with themselves, be honest with other people. They're not going to be open to put in the action. They're not going to be willing to put in the work that it takes to get sober, to stay sober, to build that foundation, and to start to learn how to live the life that many of us in recovery have come to know.
But before we go, on the Up for Life podcast, I like to give everybody an opportunity to let people know how they could see you, how they could see your work, how they could talk to you. So if somebody's interested in checking out your photography, how do they find you? Or if they want to message you about some of the other more personal topics like recovery and such. Just real quick, what are the best ways to get you on social?
Yeah, hit me up on Messenger if you want to dive into any of those more serious topics. Definitely, if you're interested in checking out my photography, Instagram is the place to do that, and you can find me at Keith A. Griner there on Instagram. And to all of you listening that already do follow me and support my art, support my work and my passion, I'm greatly appreciative of all of that. And, I see people sharing and liking my work, and that means the world to me, because I put, my heart and my soul into that work, and it's my life.
Yes, indeedy. Want to say thank you to my man, Keith Griner, for that thoughtful and inspiring conversation from back over New Year's when we could go to live shows and do shit like that. If you want to check out Keith's work or holler at him for any endeavors, check him out at Fierce Photography, Fierce with a PH. There'll be a link in the show notes. If you made it this far, thank you. This was a really powerful episode that I'm proud to have presented. And we've reached the end of the journey for episode 33. And like we always do about this time, the Vibe Junkie Jam of the Week. And I'm going to go with something that resonates deeply within me for so many years, and that is the mighty Alice in Chains, from their timeless, iconic swan song at MTV Unplugged. I want to say it's like 96. It's everything. The whole concert, you could do any track from the set, but my personal anthem, having lived through the throes my damn self, is called Down in a Hole. The original version is incredible. It's found on the album Dirt, but Lane is beginning to knock on heaven's door at the time of this performance. MTV Unplugged. The band hadn't performed together in a couple of years, and Lane Staley's in poor shape, but brings his A game, as does Jerry, Sean, and Mike. And I wanted to close out this monumental episode with Dave from Dopey Podcast and Keith Griner and Sometimes It Snows in April with my anthem, Down in a Hole. You're hearing Brother from the Sap EP, also from that Unplugged. But I'm going to play in its entirety Down in a Hole, Alice in Chains, MTV Unplugged, and that should sing you back home. For episode 33 of the Up for Life podcast, I want to say thank you for tuning in. Please rate and review on iTunes. Holler at your boy, B.Getz at upforlife.com. And we will see you next week. Yes, indeedy.